Chapter 596. In the helicopter, Ferrio took a puff of his cigar. He was satisfied to see all the cars stop under the deterrence of the rocket. At this time, his adjutant received a message through a special communication device. He quickly reported, found Cacho. He was abandoned in the underground parking lot of Saragu's supermarket. He has a mental breakdown and keeps saying things like, "I'm a government soldier." He should have told them everything he knows. Get rid of him. Ferrio raised his right hand and made a throat-slitting gesture. What about Cacho's superior, Markdom, who gave him the order? The adjutant asked cautiously. Ferrio glanced at him coldly. Same. Yes, General. The adjutant didn't say anything else and quickly made the arrangements. When the call ended, he spoke again, full of doubts. Lu must know that this was done by the government army. Although the signal was intermittent, it was still there. The secret should have been leaked. If we kill him now, not only will we not solve the problem, but we will also be suspected and get into big trouble. Ferrio raised his eyelids slightly and looked around at his trusted subordinates. Didn't I tell you the real goal this time? No. The adjutant shook his head. And replied, "There's a saying in our tribe that those who don't know anything live longer." Ferrio looked down and saw that a portion of the soldiers at the checkpoint were methodically searching the cars in the queue. Although they still took the belongings, they were more restrained. They also didn't make things difficult for the men and women who passed the checkpoint, allowing them to drive to Kukhang. This calmed the hearts of the fugitives, and they all had the idea of spending money to avoid disaster. The government sent a regular army to hold foreign tourists hostage. They don't prohibit killing and they intend to silence them and frame the rebels. This is what Cacho knows and can be inferred, right? Ferrio leisurely put the cigar to his mouth. Yes, so we shouldn't find trouble with Lu anymore. We can just push the blame to Markdom and say that he has secretly defected to the rebels and intends to use this method to slander the government, the adjutant replied after thinking. Then why did I kill Cacho and his soldiers? Wouldn't it be better to keep them alive? Ferrio revealed a faint smile. Think about it. What if the government really intends to frame the rebels? Under this premise, what will you do when something unexpected happens and the secret might be leaked? The adjutant's expression turned solemn. We will kill all the participants and insiders and push the blame to the rebels. This is the most direct and easiest way to think of. However, once there are omissions such as Lu's existence, Cacho's confession, and the maintenance of communication, things will become troublesome. We can only find a scapegoat internally. Having said that, he looked at Ferrio in shock. Sir General, who is our target? Have you joined the rebels? No, in this turmoil there are no rebels or government forces. There is only the difference between those who are loyal to the pharaoh and those who are against him. Ferrio paused. Our target is Satha. General Satha. The adjutant was shocked and cold sweat instantly appeared on his forehead. This was one of the leaders of the Brotherhood, a figure with real power in the Kukhang area, and the Brigadier General's immediate superior. He was a member of the regular army. I am General Satha's subordinate. Everything I do is under his orders. Ferrio joked, which was rare for him. Originally, I was going to hold the hostages and wait for help to arrive before causing trouble and giving General Satha an unforgettable memory. At first, I was very angry because I thought that if things were to blow up prematurely, Satha would be alerted. But now, it seems that Lu Cheng's accident isn't necessarily a bad thing. If we can attract China's revenge and mighty ones to kill us, it seems even more perfect than the original plan. Over 100 demigods, that's a country so powerful that it makes people tremble. The adjutant was enlightened and he spoke with some concern. But General, you will also be in great danger. If we make a move directly, they will definitely retaliate. Do we only rely on this armed helicopter? With the current ammunition reserves, I'm afraid it will be difficult to kill Lu Cheng or even hurt him. At his level, his mobility is too high and his speed is terrifyingly fast. Don't worry, he will be a burden, Ferrio replied calmly. He rubbed his face, causing the large patches of beard to fall off. Immediately after, his sea-blue eyes turned dark red. His nose was slightly sunken, his forehead was slightly protruding, and his cheeks were drooping. Although the individual changes weren't big, when put together, it was as if he had become a different person. Look, I'm not Ferrio. I'm Zayed, he said with a slight smile. Zayed was General Satha's confidant and was slightly weaker than Ferrio. The adjutant lowered his head even more, his heart filled with fear and uneasiness. After knowing so many secrets, it was normal for him to be afraid of being silenced. Don't worry, I still need your help. Later, if anyone dares to stop to take photos or videos, shoot them with a rocket. After doing this, you will be on the same level as me, Ferio said, both commanding and comforting. Then, his expression turned solemn. For the pharaoh. For the pharaoh. The adjutant and the others shouted in unison, all of them fanatical. At this moment, Ferio half closed his eyes and muttered to himself with an intoxicated expression. At this juncture, encountering such an opponent, it really seems like a deliberate arrangement by the gods. This is both a test and an opportunity. I can already imagine the satisfaction, joy, and carefreeness after killing Lu Cheng. This will allow me to take that final step and become a true demigod. If I can't defeat and kill Lu Cheng while he's burdened, helpless, and restrained by the armed helicopters, then that means I deserve to die. This lunatic. This sick guy. The adjutant cursed in his heart. He wasn't sure if Brigadier General Ferio was doing this for the pharaoh, for himself, or for both. After a few seconds, Ferio opened his eyes again. He looked down and said with dissatisfaction, "They're too slow." "Lower the helicopter," he ordered, then got up and walked to the side of the cabin door. When the helicopter was within 15 meters, Ferio's eyes flashed. He pressed out with his right palm and the surroundings suddenly turned dark. It was as though a sandstorm was about to hit Oasis Town. The darkness moved slowly, sweeping across one car after another. The heat, activity, and other characteristics of the creatures inside appeared vaguely in Ferio's mind. As long as Lu Cheng didn't control his breathing, heartbeat, and aura, he would be like a torch in the night, bright and eye-catching. At this moment, in the dark lake of Ferio's heart, a burning sensation like the sun shone, tearing apart all the haze and illuminating all the darkness. Found him. Ferio squinted his eyes and said to himself happily. In the crimson car, Yenjika found that the soldiers at the checkpoint ahead weren't like the soldiers in the city who would kill and humiliate indiscriminately. Other than taking some belongings, they would follow the rules and let them go after inspection. They seemed to be looking for someone. The girl observed for a while and speculated. If it involved herself, it would be even more dangerous. This is the government army, Lu Cheng concluded. He thought of Officer Cacho, whom he had captured last night, and had a bad feeling about the inspection. As soon as he finished speaking, a cold and evil feeling swept across his body. The strong sense of danger made him shout without thinking, "Turn left. Hit the gas." Yenjika didn't understand, but she instinctively believed in Lu Cheng and his anxious tone. She hurriedly released the brake and stepped on the gas pedal to its limit. At the same time, she turned the steering wheel to the left. Almost no thoughts flashed through her mind during the entire process. With a roaring sound, the car left the engine and sped to the side, entering the muddy ground of the oasis. Bang! At this time, the armed helicopter fired a missile at the place where the car was originally parked. Boom! The strong explosion shook the surrounding glass and overturned the cars in front and behind. Flames and smoke billowed. "Speed up and go around the checkpoint." Lu Cheng's heart was as cold as ice as he calmly ordered. Yenjika sped up without hesitation, running towards the checkpoint on the bumpy ground of the oasis. "Brake. Turn right." Lu Cheng looked around and predicted. Whoosh! The crimson car stopped and turned, approaching the original road. 2 rockets, one on the left and one on the right, completed the coverage. Rumble. The violent explosion woke up the others. The escapees no longer cared about anything else and rushed towards the checkpoint in all kinds of ways. The scene became extremely chaotic. Pretty nimble. In the helicopter, Ferio faintly smiled. Holding his unfinished cigar, he leaped down and gracefully landed on top of a car from a height of more than 10 meters. His landing created a huge depression, but he didn't shake or sway. He strode forward, using his own mobility to intercept the relatively heavy crimson car. He was trying to block the route so that it would be distracted by one thing and be hit sooner or later. Seeing the red-eyed man in the military uniform getting closer and closer, Lu Cheng's mind was filled with thoughts. He already had a plan. He sent a voice transmission to Yenjika. "I'll stop him. You continue to rush through the checkpoint. If you can't dodge, immediately abandon the car and save yourself. Don't worry about anything else." With Ku's strength and mobility, she wouldn't be hit so easily unless they formed a net of fire. And it was very difficult for an armed helicopter to do so. At this critical juncture, Yenjika didn't waste time. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Lu Cheng suddenly pushed open the car door and rolled out through the gap. With a push of his hand, he leaped and crossed a distance of more than 10 to 20 meters to where Ferio was. The machine gun fired, hitting the air and leaving a row of bullet holes in the ground. Fario threw away the cigar in his hand, smiled at Lu Cheng and said in perfect English, "Tell me, will you die first or will they?" Chapter 597. Lu Cheng had no intention of wasting time with Fario. Yanjika was in danger. To him, every moment was precious. He had to seize every second. The car's speed and mobility couldn't compare to that of an inhuman stage expert. Once faced with such an enemy, there was no way to shake them off or go around them. At such a time, if he was still overcautious and worried about this and that, hesitating to stay in the car, it would be tantamount to sitting and waiting for death. He would be a burden to the people he wanted to protect. Lu Cheng had made full use of this in 2 previous missions. He knew this very well. Therefore, when he saw the man in the red uniform approaching, he made a prompt decision to jump out of the car and meet the enemy. As for whether there were other enemies, it was no longer a consideration. If he couldn't even get past this obstacle, what was the point of thinking about anything else? Of course, Lu Cheng had also thought of a response to the worst-case scenario. He reminded Fario that if Yanjika was attacked by a strong enemy or was in a situation where she couldn't avoid, she should abandon the car and ignore Zhou Yong and the rest. When the time came, he would protect her and do his best to open a bloody path to retreat into the desert. He would use his inhuman speed and ability to cross mountains to seek hope. Bam! Before Fario could finish his words, Lu Cheng had already pounced forward. He extended his right leg and stomped on the ground. Strength poured into it, and with a flip of the plow he kicked up a sky full of dirt. Pieces of gold-like rock shot towards his opponent's body like arrows. Whoosh! Between stomps and flicks, he changed his position like a ghost and suddenly arrived at his opponent's flank. He gathered his chi and blood at his lower abdomen, and the ice and fire rotated, forming a Dan in equilibrium. In that instant, Fario's face turned ashen, as though he had been dead for a long time. His entire body had turned into a mummified corpse. He raised his left hand to block his eyes, ignoring the other attacks. He allowed the dirt arrows to hit his body, tearing his clothes, splitting his skin and opening up his muscles. However, all he saw was a grayish-white color, and not a single drop of blood flowed out. Beneath his feet, the moist soil of the oasis dried up in an instant, gathering into lumps and dispersing into sand. The surrounding plants withered one by one, as though their lives had been sucked away. A dim light shone from his feet, and an evil aura enveloped him. Fario half-turned his body and swung his fists from left to right. They were so heavy that they seemed to be burdened with hundreds of lives. He was wearing a light golden glove, and there were protrusions at the joints, as if they were bone spurs shining with a cold luster. This was the terrifying legacy of Nile's Nether King lineage, the judgment of withering. Once it hit the opponent, not only would it cause the opponent to retreat, it would also corrode the opponent's flesh and blood, causing them to wither. Before Lu Cheng figured out who he was and what he was good at, Fario decided to go all out. He wanted to finish him off in a few moves to avoid any unexpected changes. If he could get rid of Lu Cheng's comrade before the armed helicopter got rid of him, it would definitely be an achievement worth bragging about. It would boost his confidence and allow him to take the final step to become a demigod. Bang! Fario swung his fist horizontally at Lu Cheng. He had risked injury just now to prevent his opponent from having a chance to dodge. On the other side, Yanjika, who was driving, looked straight ahead, observing the guards and the helicopters that appeared from time to time. Her ears were listening to the propellers. She couldn't make as accurate a judgment as Lu Cheng, so she could only take the initiative and constantly change directions irregularly to avoid the attacks. Rumble. Da-da-da. Rumble. The crimson sedan was like a swimming fish, swaying its head and tail in an exaggerated manner, advancing and retreating at times. Amidst the smoke and flames, it approached the checkpoint and tried to go around it. Yanjika's heart was very tense. She knew that it was dangerous to be completely passive. The slightest mistake would immediately result in a blow. Inexperienced, she could only imitate Lu Cheng, turning water into ice and telling herself to calm down, and calm down. Quietness begets wisdom, and wisdom begets wisdom. The girl, who was prone to minor illnesses and wasn't too afraid of death, quickly regained her rationality. Ridiculous and inflexible thoughts flashed through her mind. At this moment, Lu Cheng, who was in Dan equilibrium, was trying his best to hypnotize himself with words like, "Ku is a quasi-Dan stage, she'll definitely be fine," and so on. He placed his will at the apex of the universe and coldly looked down at the stars and darkness below. He moved quickly, and the resplendent heat outlined a fighting character that would never admit defeat and would fight its way into the 9 heavens. Boom. As Ferio swung his fist of judgment, Lu Qing exploded his Dan force and expanded his body. Suddenly, in Ferio's eyes, his opponent, who was less than 1.8 meters tall, transforming into a nearly 2-meter tall monster. His muscles were bulging and his greenish-black fascias were frightening. He looked down at Ferio like a giant from the legends. At the same time, Lu Cheng's eyes widened in anger. He swung his left fist to the side, breaking through the air barrier and sending it flying at the same time as the explosion. Force concentration superimposed on the fighting formula. Double burst, absolute attack. Shock flashed through Ferio's eyes as he saw his fist collide with his opponent's. Rumble. It was as if there had been an explosion. Ferio's dark golden gloves were dented and distorted. Ferio's bones creaked and Lu Cheng's skin lost its luster. His flesh became shriveled, and the strong wind blew up the surrounding sand and stones, creating a small sandstorm. At that moment, Ferio's eyes were filled with shock and fear. He felt that his opponent's strength was no less than a demigod's. It even exceeded their usual punches and kicks. It wasn't that Ferio hadn't fought a demigod before. He'd lasted a full 10 seconds, but that was because his opponent had shown restraint, and because he had a choice in his fighting style. How could he face a demigod head-on? T. Boundless divine power surged. Ferio swung his right arm, and his body shot backward like a bolt of lightning to neutralize the force and prevent fractures and imbalances from occurring at the same time. Lu Qing didn't care about the withered area. Circulating his qi and blood, he stimulated his body and took a step forward. It was as if the ground had shrunk, and he closed in on his opponent again, not giving him a chance to regroup. Another hug, another resplendent star shift. Lu Qing took a step forward with his left foot and swung his arm like a whip. He was a dozen centimeters taller and twice as strong. His large tendons were like serpents, coiling, pulsating, and knotting. They stirred up the sound of the wind, displaying impressive strength. No fire, no ice, the purest form. Double burst, double combo. Rumble. It was as if a high-speed fighter jet was flying between them. Lu Cheng's whip left behind afterimages as it lashed down in front of his opponent, who couldn't dodge in time. Ferio instantly turned into a mummified corpse. Raising his heavy arm, he hurriedly blocked with his fist with the strength of the underworld. Bam! This whip caused sparks to fly in all directions. It caused the gloves to crack, and it caused Ferio's arms to distort in an abnormal manner. It caused his feet to sink into the ground up to his ankles, and it caused the enemy to pause momentarily. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Lu Qing took a deep breath, retracted his qi and blood, and returned to the ice and fire embrace, outlining the fighting formula. With a boom, countless capillaries in his eyes burst. His bloodshot eyes locked onto his opponent. His anger from being targeted for no reason and putting his little fairy in such a dangerous situation boiled over. Double burst, third strike. Bam! Lu Qing pushed his shoulder and swung his arm. His shriveled fist was used as a weapon, and he threw it at Ferio's abdomen. Ferio's feet had just retracted when he could only turn into a mummified corpse again. Gritting his teeth, he reached down and grabbed at his opponent's fist. Rumble. Lu Cheng's fist pushed against Ferio's palm and smashed into his abdomen. The punch pierced through his clothes and muscles, leaving behind a gaping hole where one could see his intestines but no blood flowed out. As an expert who had been on the battlefield for a long time, Ferio didn't care about such a small injury. The soil under his feet quickly eroded, and a dark light flashed in his eyes. He was about to counterattack. At that moment, Lu Qing used his shriveled fist from the realm of all-seeing God to grab Ferio's hand at his abdomen. With a violent shake, his opponent's joints cracked, and the foreign force he had gathered dissipated. His muscles were weak and he was like a subdued cobra. Darkness appeared in Lu Cheng's mind, cold and deep. With the sound of thunder, Lu Qing pulled his opponent's shoulder and threw out another punch. White fog swirled around him and frost filled the air. Severe warning. Not good. Ferio's hair stood on end. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of illusory pitch-black blood at Lu Cheng's face. The smell of blood spread in all directions and it was nauseating. He wanted to force his enemy to dodge, neutralize the danger and gain the upper hand. At that moment, Lu Qing didn't move his body or his feet. He merely tilted his face to the left, avoiding eye contact. Bam! His fist landed on Ferio's shoulder, causing his bones to cave in and ash to scatter everywhere. Sizzle. Half of his face was stained with black liquid and corroded. It was a hideous and terrifying sight. Ferrio's eyes were unfocused as though he had fallen into a long slumber. Lu Cheng's other arm shook and with a smack, it landed on the stunned enemy's head. Bam! Ferrio's head exploded. Fragments and bits of red and white flew everywhere, and no one could find anything that was still intact. He didn't even leave behind a trace of regret or fear. Lu Cheng didn't even look at him. He turned around abruptly, picked up a rock and held it in his palm. Imbuing it with flame force, he took large strides using the simplified attainment formula and threw it at the helicopter in midair. Boom! The rock flew like a rocket, covering a distance of several hundred meters. Behind Lu Cheng, the headless Ferio fell to the ground. Chapter 598. On the helicopter, Ferrio's adjutant watched the battle unfold while ordering the pilot to lower the altitude to give the Crimson sedan more pressure and a more saturated attack. He wanted to end the battle as soon as possible. Boom. Da-da-da. Missiles exploded and machine guns rained down. The Eagle chased after the prey that had suddenly stopped and turned around. Victory was getting closer and closer. At this moment, Ferrio's adjutant suddenly shouted. His tone was full of panic and fear, as if he had seen something unbelievable. Quick! Dodge! Rise! Immediately after, his voice became sharp as he gave orders in short and hurried words. It was as if he had seen the monster Death approaching. The pilot instinctively obeyed. Just as he was about to operate the helicopter, he found that the digital dashboard had become chaotic. He lost control of the helicopter for a moment and stopped in place. No! A beam of white light shot out like a missile. The adjutant's scream of fear and despair was suddenly swallowed up by the violent sound. A red high-temperature firework bloomed in midair. Its tongue spread out and engulfed every corner of the cabin. Boom! The black helicopter exploded for the second time. A bright light leaped out from the fuel tank. A huge, burning ball of light illuminated Yenjika's vision. It suddenly fell to the ground not far from the left side of the sedan. Fragments scattered everywhere as it completely disintegrated. This made the girl, who had used her supernatural ability to interfere with the operation of the helicopter's precision instruments, open her mouth in shock. Her neat white teeth were half open, and her delicate tongue was faintly discernible. After she regained her rationality and grasped the idea, she had been waiting for an opportunity. Waiting for the Black Eagle to lower its altitude again and enter the range of her supernatural ability. Running away without counterattacking would cause problems sooner or later. Zhou Xinying also saw this scene through the window. She felt like she was watching a war movie in a movie theater. Ma Chaoyang, Zhou Yong and the rest immediately looked over. They were shocked and forgot to rejoice. Yenjika's mind was shaken. She didn't make a mistake in her imagination. Instinctively, she turned the steering wheel and stepped on the accelerator. Once again they were far away from the checkpoint and avoided the soldiers' gunfire. Suddenly, she felt the undulation of the vehicle and the shaking of the earth. It seemed like there was a herd of wild elephants chasing after them. The small army diagonally in front of them, which had been attacking in a disciplined manner, scattered and fled in panic. There was a limit to a person's courage. There were very few troops that could not break down in a crisis. Thump, thump. Clear and deafening footsteps sounded. Lu Cheng in his martial arts suit appeared on the right side of the car. He slowed down, opened the door and sat in the car again. Are you all right? Yenjika blurted out. It's just a small wound. Lu Cheng felt a burning pain on the right side of his face. He knew that the wound was hideous enough to frighten the girls in the back row. In the situation just now, his mind was filled with thoughts of killing his opponent at all costs. In the face of such a powerful enemy, the slightest hesitation or concession would result in a reversal of the situation. At that time, not only would he be in danger, but he would also delay the rescue of Ko. Because of this, he had prepared severe warning and could not divert his attention to use ice armor, so he did not retreat in the face of danger and exchanged injuries for victory. Of course, this was also due to the fact that he was able to accurately judge the enemy's attacks under the realm of encountering gods in the void. That's good. Yenjika heaved a sigh of relief and turned the car onto the road. Let me heal my wounds first, Lu Cheng said as he visualized. He formed a seal with his hands and exhaled. Confrontation. Tranquility descended. Mysteriously, Lu Cheng's blood flowed into his right fist again, nourishing the withered muscles. Under the frenzied metabolism, it slowly but surely healed itself. However, after shaking off the black liquid, the corroded right side of his face healed rather slowly. It even caused him to feel feverish on his forehead and slight dizziness in his head. Poison? A very strange poison? The thought flashed through Lu Cheng's mind as he made up his mind. He quickly made a forced concentration and gathered ice, fire, mind, qi, blood, and poison in his lower abdomen. A starry sky appeared, rotating and balancing. He placed his consciousness at the apex of the universe. Relying on his superior control, he gathered the poison bit by bit, sending it through the absolute cold darkness. Slowly, it showed signs of freezing and deactivation. In no time, the poison approached the nearest star. It sizzled, burned, and evaporated into gas. Boom. With the explosion of his Dan force, Lu Qing rolled down the car window and spat out a jet of black gas, dispersing it into the natural world. This healing method was unique to him. Confrontation. Lu Qing exhaled again. The corroded skin and flesh on his face fell off, revealing a squirming scarlet that quickly formed a scar. It was still hideous but much better than before. In another 10 to 20 minutes the scar would fall off. With the help of his superior self-healing ability and the confrontation formula, the remaining scars would vanish completely in less than 3 days. No need to play ghost. He laughed, drawing Yanjika's puzzled gaze. Unfortunately, she could only see the left side of his face. Disfigured. Yanjika's eyes darted upwards as she made a guess based on the words playing ghost. She wasn't worried about the outcome. Qing could even remove old scars, let alone new ones. This was truly an ability that he was envious of. It was a pity that it required the realm of all-seeing God and the confrontation formula. In a moment of desperation, Lu Qing answered succinctly. With that, he looked at the road ahead, at the occasional abandoned car by the roadside due to forgetting to refuel. He sighed softly. I thought an opponent like that could force me to make a breakthrough. Unfortunately, all it did was add some experience to the death match. In the back row, Zhou Yong, Ma Chaoyang, and the rest fell silent. They weren't martial arts enthusiasts, so they couldn't tell Ferrio's level of strength. However, they had a deep understanding of how terrifying a fully equipped armed helicopter was from television, daily life, and the experience of being hunted down. One could only imagine how terrifying someone who could destroy such a thing so effortlessly was. After hearing Lu Cheng's exclamation, Yanjika pursed her lips and comforted him. Perhaps you have to walk your own path. External forces are useless. Following that, she changed the topic. Qing, I feel that my supernatural ability is similar to a magnetic field. It's quite useful against high-tech and high-precision things. Yes. Lu Qing agreed. As he spoke, he replayed everything that had happened in his mind. Suddenly he said, Cuckoo, stop the car. What's wrong? Yanjika stepped on the pedals slowly and brought the car to a steady stop. And Mighty One close to physical invulnerability attacked us out of the blue. This is very strange. I'm afraid there will be more trouble in the future. Lu Qing couldn't understand why someone would come after him when he had already reported the situation to the military. Was it a misunderstanding, a chance encounter, or something else? To prevent the worst from happening, he made a prompt decision. He turned to Ma Chaoyang, Zhou Yong, and the rest and said, My girlfriend and I seem to have become targets. You guys will be in more danger if you follow us. Why don't we split up now? You guys switch to another car and drive to Kukang. Now that there are refugees everywhere, you won't stand out if you blend in with them. When you get there, you won't enter the city, but you'll pass through the checkpoints. Follow the route I'll give you later. What about you guys? Zhou Yong and Ma Chaoyang asked in unison. We'll walk in the wilderness and over the mountains. This way we'll be more mobile and less likely to be discovered. Lu Qing only described the method and didn't mention the actual destination. Thinking of the running ability they had shown, Li Xiaoyun and the rest fell silent. Then they recalled the terrifying rocket attack and felt that it might be better to split up. Hence they nodded and thanked him. Lu Qing immediately asked his wife to turn the car around and drive back to Bori town. He found a car that had lost its owner and had a key. Using Yanjika's supernatural ability, he extracted gasoline from the abandoned car and poured it into the car. When he tossed the key to Zhou Yong, he picked up a few weapons for them. He also asked a girl who was trained in shooting and hunting to teach them how to use them. Thank you. See you back in China. Ma Chaoyang and the rest waved goodbye and drove along the road to Kukang. Where are we going? Yanjika glanced around and asked sharply. Walking in the wilderness was a given, but where exactly? To Fartuat. When we get to Kukang, we still have to go to Dika before we can leave. I'm afraid of accidents. Fartuat is a little far and not suitable for Zhou Yong and the rest, but for us, if we take a straight line, it won't be too bad. Once we get there, there will be boats to help us evacuate, Lu Qing explained. Okay. Yanjika looked up and nodded. Then she added, my supernatural ability can also determine the direction like a compass, so I'm not afraid of getting lost. Since they were going to walk in the wilderness, the two gave up a portion of their luggage, leaving only the girl's shoulders to pack the most important items. After everything was done, Lu Qing notified the military while there was still signal. He carried Yanjika on his back and strode out of the oasis, moving faster than a speeding car. Along the way he took care to hide his tracks. Kukang inside the military base. General Satha, whose hair was wrapped up, received a report from Tetan's city. It said that Brigadier General Forio had failed to attack an Eastern Mighty One and was killed instead. Eastern Mighty One? One nation. Forio? Satha narrowed his eyes as if he had understood something. He clenched his fist and growled, Pharaoh? After a few seconds he called Zayed and asked him to gather the Brotherhood leaders in the military and put Kukang under martial law. Lu Qing carried Yanjika on his back. He ran and rested, sometimes in a straight line, sometimes in a roundabout way, sometimes in a dash, sometimes in hiding. After 5 hours they finally smelled the damp seawater and saw the beautiful city in the distance. Farduat. Throughout the whole process the girl didn't speak much and didn't ask to move alone. She only stayed alert when Lu Qing rested and gave him water when he was thirsty so that he wouldn't waste his ice force. Every time she thought of hiding in the shadows of the sand dunes, watching out for each other, their bodies pressed against each other, she felt that there was no need for words. Their hearts were connected. Few were almost liberated. Lu Qing looked at the city and laughed. Yanjika pursed her lips, revealing her dimples. It wasn't easy. After sighing, she tilted her head slightly and smiled sweetly. Qing, I have good news for you. What? Lu Qing asked in confusion. Ku has been on my back all this time and there was no signal. What good news could there be? After today's training, I feel like I can complete force concentration now. Yanjika raised her chin and announced proudly and expectantly. This would help Qing perfect his martial arts and find the path to physical invulnerability. This was something he had been waiting for a long time. P.S. Allergic dermatitis, patches of it on your body. Sigh. Chapter 599. Surprised and delighted, Lu Qing blurted out, Really? His reaction made Yanjika feel very proud. She slightly tilted her head and snorted with her eyes twinkling. You still don't believe me? That's because I thought you would need at least 6 or 7 more days of training. Lu Qing didn't hide his surprise and delight. Haha, you underestimate me. Yanjika chuckled and then said thoughtfully, When I'm on the brink of death, my body and soul seem to be connected and become one. However, I still prefer a stable and peaceful life. Me too. We're not afraid of accidents, but we don't want to encounter them either. Lu Qing chimed in. Yanjika hid in the shadow of a sand dune. She looked at the scorching sun hanging high in the sky and said eagerly, Shall I show you now or wait until we're in the city? Let's do it now, Lu Qing replied after some thought. Due to the interruption of communication, he didn't know much about the situation in the port city of Fartuat. He needed to rest and recover his strength to deal with any accidents. Since that was the case, he might as well take the opportunity to experience the changes in Yanjika's first dan of equilibrium and find the key to merging martial arts and cultivation. There might be surprises. Yanjika nodded solemnly. She drank the last mouthful of water and tossed the bottle aside. She got into her stance and visualized the confrontation formula. She reined in her body and mind and adjusted her spirit. Immediately after, Yanjika retracted her chi, blood, body force and earth force, condensing them into a ball that spun wildly. Her willpower was like a millstone, constantly squeezing this small ball and shrinking it rapidly until it reached a certain limit. At this moment she guided her spirit and caused the big Dan to collapse and form a balance. The earth force was the star and the chi force was the darkness. Lu Qing, who had already formed the ice mirror and placed his palm on Yanjika's shoulder, suddenly felt that the big Dan of the human body at equilibrium was guiding the vibrations in her head. It created a miraculous and temporary resonance with the surroundings and the blue sky above. Resonance? A bolt of lightning flashed through the fog in Lu Qing's mind, illuminating all the darkness and fuzziness. He found the commonality between the different cultivation methods and understood the point of blending cultivation and martial arts. Yes, resonance. The resonance between the human body and nature. Just like in the ordinary Dan stage, the effect of force depended on the special waves produced by the body to create different effects. Physical invulnerability meant that one's body, mind, and spirit were integrated as one, resonating with the outside world in heaven and earth, creating a direct connection. Regardless of whether it was the prayer asceticism of the mission sect, the mass ceremony, or the depraved actions of the spirit cultivators that broke the fixed pattern, they were all for the sake of removing the shackles of the soul, guiding the changes in the spirit, and triggering a special frequency that would gradually strengthen and obtain feedback. Their purpose was to establish a connection with the heavenly master, the devil, and their own spirit, and to establish a channel. Judging from Ku's progress just now, this kind of resonance was not only related to the formation of the Dan in equilibrium, but also involved the ethereal and indescribable spirit. It also involved the brain that produced this kind of wave. Even though modern technology was advanced, they still couldn't figure out 10 to 20% of the mystery of the brain. Back then he also had a similar experience, but at that time he was muddle-headed and didn't understand, so it didn't leave a deep impression on him. Lu Qing withdrew his right hand. He had a new understanding of the differences and similarities between cultivation and martial arts at this stage. The reason why cultivators could naturally connect to heaven and earth once they formed the Jindan was because their Jindan was a substantial product of highly condensed essence, qi, spirit, and will. It was in equilibrium as heaven and earth, corresponding to a certain prototype, and resonating. Moreover, their spirit was completely integrated into it, so they could very easily and smoothly guide the changes in the special positions of the brain. Martial artists controlled the spirit with their will, and through visualization they changed, polished, and improved it. It guided the movement of the organs and muscles, going deep into the details, causing the genes to mutate. Through force concentration, all these processes gradually formed a whole. When the root pulp and spirit resonated with the outside world and reached a certain level, the barrier would be broken and the connection would be formed. It seems that at this stage, when I reached the Dan in equilibrium, I could actually resonate with heaven and earth, which was a pseudo-physical invulnerability. However, this state wouldn't last long. Once it was dissolved, I would immediately fall back to the inhuman level. Lu Qing looked at Yan Zhika, who had opened her eyes, and praised sincerely, "You're now a Dan stage expert. And the kind with supernatural abilities." Yan Zhika seemed to have washed away the dullness of passing through the sand and became radiant again. Her eyebrows curved and her dimples deepened. "How about you? Did you comprehend anything?" "More or less." Lu Qing pretended to be calm and answered. He already had an idea of what to do next. He also understood why he couldn't make the great leap when he disintegrated the Jindan. Simply put, it was uncoordinated. The root pulp of the spirit was not in harmony with the actual state. He had reached the Dan in equilibrium, resonating with the outside world with the cosmic universe. When he usually visualized, he cultivated Emperor Yen and Ice Spirit. The two intertwined, each had their own force, and they mutated separately. In the end, he had to rely on the rotation of force concentration to forcefully form a whole, which was why they were separated. The most important thing now was to change the visualization diagram, fusing ice and fire into one from the source, and then guiding the spirit and root pulp to truly transform them into the cosmic universe. As for how to change the visualization diagram, of course, it was based on the heaven and earth of the Dan during force concentration. And when he reached the Dan in equilibrium, he could also adjust according to the resonance with the outside world, making the cosmic universe more complete and compatible. "You've thought it through?" Yenjika's eyes lit up with surprise and asked instinctively, "Does this mean Qing is about to make the great leap?" "Yes." "Next, we can think of various ways to try to break through to the physical invulnerability stage." Lu Qing suddenly gave her a thumbs up and smiled. "Indeed, I still have to rely on you, Coach Yen." "Of course," the girl pursed her lips and raised her head happily and proudly. "I'm the pillar of our family." Lu Qing calmed down and thought carefully for a while. He had a clear understanding of the conditions for a martial artist to reach the physical invulnerability stage. First, the strength of the body had to reach a certain standard due to the mutation of the root pulp and the cultivation of the body. Connecting with the heaven and earth was like walking in the universe, full of danger. How could one do it without a qualified protective suit? Second, the spirit and root pulp had to resonate with the outside world, and the intensity was not low. This was the basic condition for a breakthrough. Third, the realm of all-seeing God, or super-strong innate talent. Without these, one would not be able to control the minute details of the body and establish a connection with the outside world. And with it, the second condition could be twice the result with half the effort, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. Fourth, a strong willpower. This was the key to breaking through the final barrier. It was like a ship that was ready, but to cross the river, one still needed a helmsman. Lu Cheng's supernatural ability had awakened for the third time. His physical strength had long surpassed the standard, and he already had the third condition. Now he only needed to change the visualization, adjust the minute details, and achieve resonance. When that time came, everything would be ready except for the east wind. These conditions, other than all-seeing God, were all part of the grinding process. Therefore, the earlier one reached the high pin, the more time one had to train, and the easier it would be for them to reach the physical invulnerability stage. It was no wonder that many Inhumans would enter the war-torn zones for real practical training. The stimulation between life and death could indeed strengthen one's willpower and help them take the final step. Of course, the breakthrough was a process, not a node. Even if one broke through the barrier at the last moment, it would still take 10 to 20 days to connect with the heaven and earth, adjust according to the feedback, and establish a solid connection. Only when all this was done would one be a true physical invulnerability mighty one. Thinking of this, Lu Cheng smiled and said to Yan Zhika, "Help me watch. I'll give it a try." Okay. The new Danqi expert, Cuckoo, was eager to try and keep a lookout for her surroundings. Lu Cheng stood in a still stance, gathered his qi and blood in his dantian, and let the universe of darkness and stars take shape and rotate slowly. This time he didn't do things like writing the 9 words formula. Instead, he raised his willpower, messed up his mind, and let it spread throughout the dantian. The universe inhaled and exhaled, and the stars moved naturally. In that feeling of silence, Lu Cheng felt as though he was truly standing outside the atmosphere, in the cold and dangerous darkness. The blazing sun in the distance breathed and expanded, with the same rhythm, as though it had a subtle connection with him. Comprehending the resonance and the charm, Lu Cheng only ended the Dan concentration realm after a few minutes. His force gushed out of him. He activated the confrontation formula, cleared his mind, and started visualizing again. This time he wasn't visualizing Emperor Yen or Ice Spirit, but a combination of the two. The former was the star, heavy and scorching, while the latter was the void, cold and dark. They guided each other, transformed each other, rotated and balanced. It was in line with the miniature universe after Lu Cheng's force concentration. After repeated attempts, Lu Cheng finally completed this new visualization with reference when he was in a state of exhaustion. Visualizing refined the mind guided the root pulp, and the already balanced state of ice and fire adjusted slightly, making it even more harmonious. Beside him, Yan Zhika looked around and listened attentively, focusing on completing the task Lu Cheng gave her. After an unknown period of time, she suddenly heard a series of thunderous sounds around her. They went from sparse to dense and gradually merged into one. Amidst the banging sounds, she looked back at her husband in shock. She realized that the air around Lu Cheng had formed a vortex, and when it landed on her, it was both hot and cold. It can't be, right? Yan Zhika was speechless, dumbfounded. At this moment, everything calmed down. Lu Cheng slowly opened his eyes, and in the depths of his eyes was a dazzling darkness, like the perfect starry night sky in the highlands. "You broke through?" Yan Zhika blurted out. "How is that possible?" Lu Cheng shook his head and laughed. He continued, "However, maybe it's because the root pulp was guided by the Jin Dan during the third awakening of the supernatural ability. Ice and fire blended into one, and it wasn't difficult to achieve a resonance." "So?" Yan Zhika asked in confusion. Lu Cheng smiled happily. "So, after another 2 or 3 adjustments, maybe tonight or tomorrow morning, I'll have all the prerequisites for physical invulnerability." Chapter 600. I see. Hearing Lu Cheng's announcement, Yan Zhika was both excited and excited. Then she looked up and asked thoughtfully, "Then, are we going to seek breakthroughs with the help of life and death battles?" Before Lu Cheng could answer, he turned his ear and pulled her to the most hidden spot of the sand dune. 20 seconds later, a few figures flitted past, stirring up a gust of sand as they headed for the port city of Fartuat. "They're pretty strong?" Yan Zhika whispered as she looked over. "There are 3 Dan stage experts. They don't look like Nile people. They're probably refugees here on holiday." Lu Cheng rubbed his throbbing temples. "Cool, I'm going to take a nap. You continue to be on guard." He didn't use the wholeness formula. He wanted to be in his best condition to face any possible situation in Fartuat. "Okay." Yan Zhika agreed without hesitation. She had already forgotten about her previous question. Lu Cheng sat down cross-legged and visualized the confrontation formula. He cleared his mind and quickly fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. Just like that, under the scorching hot desert sun in the afternoon, he slept for a full hour. When he woke up, he was full of energy, full of vigor, and was a good man again. You should rest too. Recover to your peak condition. Lu Qing didn't get up. He stretched his neck. Yanjika nodded obediently. She hid in the shadows and leaned against Lu Qing. After calming down her excited mind, she slowly fell asleep. The day's fatigue and tension had all melted away. When she woke up, it was close to evening. The sun was setting in the west, dyeing the yellow sand crimson. It was as though the place had turned into a blazing sea of fire. It was a magnificent sight. So beautiful. Yanjika opened her eyes. This was the first scene she saw. She felt like she was still in a dream. This was the calm after chaos. This was the relaxation of wariness. In her eyes, this was the most beautiful scenery of her trip to Nile. The two leaned against each other and looked at each other for a while. They got up at the same time and climbed up the sand dune. They looked at Fartuat again and saw that the lights of the port city were already lit up. The power hasn't been cut off yet. This means that even if there's chaos, it's only in certain areas. The overall situation is still orderly, Yanjika said logically. Let's go. Lu Qing smiled and squatted down. The girl leaned over and asked curiously, Qing, what's the difference between your path of martial arts and cultivation? She had been pondering about this matter before. To be more precise, it's a combination of martial arts and cultivation. My final breakthrough will be more like martial arts. With the help of Dan Equilibrium, I'll be able to resonate with the outside world in advance and establish a connection between my brain, spirit, and root pulp. The final step will still be the path of martial arts but slightly different in details. Lu Qing pondered as he rushed down the sand dune and headed for his destination like a hurricane. Strangely enough, his words were not affected in the slightest by the violent wind. Yanjika lowered her body and whispered in his ear, So you're the one who opened up a new path in the martial Tao? You can say that. Lu Qing hesitated but decided not to be modest. Opening up your own path and expanding your martial arts, our Qing is now a true grandmaster. Yanjika's eyes sparkled as she praised him proudly. Let's wait until I've truly reached the physical invulnerability stage before saying that. Lu Qing shook his head and laughed. He changed the topic thoughtfully. Speaking of which, the breakthrough to physical invulnerability involves the brain. Does that mean I have to master this aspect completely before I can advance to the forbidden territory? Perhaps. Yanjika didn't know much about this. She sighed. Since it involves the brain, it's no wonder there's a saying that if you don't reach physical invulnerability by the age of 30, you'll never be able to reach it. A martial artist who can break through this limitation must have a strong and determined heart. Before reaching the forbidden territory, due to the complexity of the brain, even if an adult in his 30s looked energetic and was still growing, and his body showed signs of continuing to grow stronger, his plasticity in all aspects would begin to decrease. The changes to the essence of the mind from cultivation would gradually become negligible. If he couldn't resonate with the outside world now, it would be almost impossible for him to do so in the future. Yeah. Lu Qing sighed when he thought of his brother-in-law, Little Ming, and the people who were struggling to advance on this path. The couple didn't chat further. They ran past a few sand dunes and stepped onto the road, nearing Fartuat. 10 minutes later, Lu Qing carried Yanjika on his back and entered the port city by taking the wrong route. They circled around the chaotic areas where gunshots rang out. After a few moments of searching, they finally found the heavily guarded Chinese consulate in Fartuat before nightfall. The consulate was filled with people from both the local and nearby cities. They had escaped to this place. Some of them had laid down something and were sleeping on the floor. Some of them were holding cell phones with intermittent signal, bored and waiting anxiously. You're finally here. I thought something bad had happened. Consul Mao Xiaobing greeted them. He held Lu Qing's right hand with both hands and shook it vigorously. He wasn't in a suit but was instead in casual wear. His sneakers were stained and his usually neat slicked-back hair was disheveled. It was obvious that he was too busy to care about his image. I didn't dare to stay in a state of exhaustion for too long. I was afraid of encountering unexpected situations, so I rested whenever I had the chance. That's why we're so late, explained Lu Qing. Mao Xiaobing led them to the interior of the building and said as they walked. As they walked, he said, Everything's been arranged. The first batch of ships will arrive tomorrow morning from the other side of the Sea of Death. They'll help you evacuate to Acropolis and take a flight back to China. Okay, answered Lu Qing and Yanjika in unison. Yanjika's eyes darted around. Embarrassed, she requested, "Mr. Consul, is the landline still working? Is there a satellite phone? I want to let my family know that I'm safe." "Yes, I'll take you there. Elder Ji and Elder Sher have called a few times already," said Mao Xiaobing as he led the couple into an office and pointed at a desk. "Oh right, Ma Chaoyang and the rest who were with you previously have also arrived at Kukang and met up with the main force. I heard about it when I contacted them earlier," added Mao Xiaobing. That's good, that's good." Yan Zhika heaved a sigh of relief. She picked up the phone and dialed home. "Hello." Ji Mingyu's solemn and tense voice came from the other end of the line. "Mom, I'm at Farduat." "I'm at the consulate," said Yan Zhika hurriedly. "Phew." Ji Mingyu heaved a long sigh of relief. Concerned, she asked, "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. I'm already at Dan stage Mighty One." Yan Zhika couldn't help but boast. Ji Mingyu couldn't help but laugh. She spat and said, "Are you mocking your mom's martial arts realm? All right, thank Lu for me." "What are you thanking him for? There's no need for thanks between us," said Yan Zhika in a hushed voice as she glanced at Mao Xiaobing, who had left the room. Lu Qing nodded with a smile. "You're you and I'm me. As a mother, can't I thank him for protecting my daughter?" said Ji Mingyu, amused. After chatting for a while and talking to Yan Kai, Yan Zhika hung up the phone. She turned to Lu Qing and said, "It's your turn." "Okay." Lu Qing first informed his family that he was safe and told them that the tourists here weren't affected. Then he called Geezer Sher. "I knew you were fine. Nile is in a mess. Who would target you for no reason?" said Sher Jiangwo proudly. At the end of his sentence, he said in a serious tone, "Brat, I have something for you to do." "What is it?" Lu Qing was surprised. "Go to Kukang or Dika and help me find a man named Cirrus. He helped me before and can be considered as my savior. Now that he's in a mess, he's asking me for help through the embassy. Help me find him and evacuate with his family. I'll get the military to give you the specific information. How about it? Do you have the guts? Do you have the confidence to do it?" asked Geezer Sher with a sneer. "I'm confident that I can escape from a physical invulnerability expert," thought Lu Qing. "Don't worry, master. I'll do my best. As long as my life isn't in danger." "Good. At least you have some filial piety." Sher Jiangwo clicked his tongue. "All right, don't hang up. I'm with Geezer Ji. He has something to tell you too." "Kuku's grandpa?" Lu Qing waited in confusion. In the girl's confused eyes, he heard Ji Jianzhang's clear voice. "Lu, I don't treat you as an outsider. I'll get straight to the point." Lin Ke sighed. After Lin Ke broke through to the inhuman stage, he snuck into the war-torn zone. With his current level, it's very dangerous for him to deal with the situation there. Moreover, it's very likely that he'll come to Nile and take advantage of the chaos to hone himself. Damn, my brother-in-law is really capricious. It's really like his style. Lu Qing criticized in his heart and answered sincerely, "Yes, Senior Ji." After hanging up the phone, Shi Jiangwo and Ji Jianzhang, who were in the military base, looked at each other and laughed at the same time. "If we don't find something for him to do, this stinky brat will definitely follow your little yen back to China. He won't take advantage of the chaos in Nile. Sharpen his skills with real weapons." Geezer Sher acted as if he knew his unfilial disciple like the back of his hand. Ji Jianzhang sighed and smiled. "We can only do so much. Whether he can make the great leap still depends on himself." Lu Qing had just put down the phone when Yan Zhika, who had been listening, covered her face and smiled bitterly. "My brother is really... How could you bring him back?" She didn't mention the mission. She understood and accepted. "Knock him out and drag him away," answered Lu Qing without hesitation. At this moment, Mao Xiaobing knocked on the door and entered. He smiled and said, "I'll bring you to meet someone." "Who is it?" asked Lu Qing, hiding his confusion. "You know each other." Mao Xiaobing smiled and turned to leave. Lu Qing and Yan Zhika followed with a confused look. When they reached the second floor, he pushed open the door of the small meeting room and revealed a figure inside. It was Peng Liyun wearing a blue martial arts suit with short hair, looking fresh and clean. Only then did the heavenly sun of the era retract the light in his eyes. The surroundings were dark and the pressure outside the window was heavy. "Priest?" shouted Lu Qing in surprise and delight. Then his eyes turned cold and he blurted out, "You've reached physical invulnerability?" Priests seem to be able to communicate with heaven and earth and summon lightning at any time. "Yeah." Peng Liyun nodded with a smile. "Previously, in the war-torn zones, I fought with a few experts. Among them was Vagar. He improved quickly and fully developed his supernatural ability. He's almost at the level of a physical invulnerability expert." "Ehe," We're not the only ones who have the opportunity to improve by leaps and bounds. Anyway, I finally made the great leap in the pursuit. Congratulations. Lu Qing and Yanjika cupped their hands and smiled without any reservations. Aren't you going to be there soon? Peng Liyun chuckled, feeling the interaction between Lu Qing and the surroundings. Yes, admitted Lu Qing frankly. Then he asked, why are you in Nile? Peng Liyun smiled and said, I've received a lot of favors from the military in the war-torn zones. This time I'm here to help and save some people. Also, in this chaotic situation, it's convenient for me to challenge the famous experts in Nile. He sounded eager like a certain someone. Why do I feel like you've been infected by Renli? Teased Lu Qing. Maybe. Peng Liyun fell into deep thought. After a long while, he came back to his senses and said, maybe we're both learning from each other. He suggested with great interest, second, you're about to break through and need the stimulation of a battle of life and death. Why don't we do it together? No need. I have a sect mission, replied Lu Qing with a smile. All right, I'll wait for Renli here. We agreed to meet at the Farduat consulate. She's almost a day late. She's also about to break through, explained Peng Liyun. I don't think you can wait. Maybe she's already headed straight for the North Pole. Lu Qing was shocked that Renli could still get lost in the war-torn zones. After chatting for a while, the couple bade farewell and left. Under Mao Xiaobing's arrangement, they had a small room to rest in. Lu Qing took advantage of his good condition to visualize the cosmic map again, adjusting his spirit and root pulp. This time he practiced until the wee hours of the morning. After sleeping for 2 hours, he woke up again and continued practicing. At dawn, Yanjika, who had slept in her clothes, opened her eyes. She saw Lu Qing practicing the routine in the small space. He looked relaxed, natural, and energetic. You're done? Asked Yanjika happily. Yeah. Lu Qing stopped and nodded. He smiled and said, Ku, didn't you ask me yesterday if I'm going to use the training of a battle of life and death to seek a breakthrough? I forgot to answer. I'll tell you the answer now. Yanjika's brain couldn't wrap around it. Lu Qing said slowly, I really have to thank Gugu. The experience of a battle of life and death with him allowed me to clearly understand what I'm worried about and what I'm reluctant to leave behind at the final juncture. During that painful and torturous trough, the blows of having my hopes dashed time and time again cleared my mind. I summarized the techniques and understood what I really want, what I'm protecting, and why I'm fighting. I've never felt so clear and determined before. With this, I took that courageous step and obtained a new life. Since you've already taken that step, why do you still seek the stimulation of a battle of life and death? He paused for a moment and said calmly, that dragon gate, I'll open it myself. Yanjika was stunned at first, but then she was overjoyed. She saw a light gather in Lu Qing's eyes. A light seemed to be blooming between his eyebrows, and the air around them began to swirl wildly. In another room a few meters away, Peng Liyun, who was stretching his muscles, suddenly stopped. He opened the window with a heart full of doubt. He saw that in the scorching summer, in the country of the desert, a cold wind was blowing, and there was frost condensing. His heart skipped a beat. He looked at the place where Lu Qing and Yanjika were temporarily staying. Jumping the dragon gate without a battle? P.S. It's a 4,000-word chapter, so it's a little late. Chapter 601. The invisible barrier was tough and sturdy. It was both an instinctive protection of the body and a shackle formed by past knowledge. Without a strong will and clear grasp, there was no way to break it. However, with a single thought from Lu Qing, it had already collapsed. It was torn to pieces by the resonance of his surging spirit and all his root pulps. At this moment, Lu Qing was like a newborn baby exposed to the scorching sun and exposed to the bone-piercing cold. Every part of his body became fragile and felt unbearable. He was on the verge of collapsing. However, his body that had been tempered and polished was only slightly damaged. It healed quickly and successfully passed the adaptation period. Thump, thump, thump. Lu Qing felt his pituitary gland, ethereal spirit, and root pulps beating at the same time. They contracted and expanded according to their usual visualization characteristics. The rhythm was shocking. Thump, thump, thump. The void around him vibrated as if echoing his words. At that moment in Lu Qing's senses, the world around him had already changed. The starry sky seemed to be pulled in front of him. Darkness enveloped everything. Only the bright and scorching sun embellished the curtain and warmed the small area that belonged to him. This was both an illusion and the reflection of the universe on the planet. It surfaced due to the resonance. Thump, 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 thump. Lu Cheng's pervasive spirit and every root pulse turned into an independent, balanced and rotating universe. They were in line with the illusion and slowly established a subtle connection. All the pores on his body opened up and he began to breathe. When he breathed in, wind and air surged. When he breathed out, cold and hot intertwined. Often, there was a shadow mixed with a faint flame. Yanjika stood at the side and watched this scene in a daze. It was like watching fireflies dance in the dark when she was young. However, the touch on her skin was sometimes cold and sometimes hot. The interior of the room turned dark. White frost condensed and snowflakes drifted. Against their backdrop, little bits of light melted the surroundings and existed in harmony and balance. So beautiful. This is the external connection between heaven and earth. Yanjika murmured in a daze. She controlled her muscles to vibrate slightly and bounce off the small things that landed on her skin. In the consulate, the people sleeping in the lobby and corridors suddenly shivered as they felt the arrival of the north wind. They opened their eyes blankly and saw white snow falling, highlighting their most beautiful appearance. "You must be dreaming," people whispered to themselves. "In reality it should be August. It should be an oasis surrounded by deserts." It's true, it's true. Someone reached out and caught a snowflake, feeling the cold wetness. At this moment, rays of light soared up, as if countless clones of the noon sun had split out, illuminating the early morning consulate, bringing warmth to many creatures shivering in the cold wind. However, this did not affect Beifeng in the slightest, nor did it affect the dance of the snow fairies. It was as if they had long since divided the territory. However, the borders were so blurry and the process was gradual. Everyone stared blankly. They felt that their hearts were shocked by this fantastic scenery, but they were also filled with doubt and puzzlement. When it snows in June there must be great injustice. Then what does it mean when it snows in August? Physical invulnerability. A fight between physical invulnerability experts, exclaimed the man who had been watching top-class professional matches all year round in shock. It was difficult for a fight of this level to not affect the surroundings. Who knew when the consulate building would collapse? Yes, physical invulnerability experts. Many people came to their senses and agreed. They wanted to run out but were afraid of being caught in the crossfire. Just as fear was spreading rapidly, the light dimmed and the north wind weakened. Everything disappeared quickly, and the environment reverted back to 6 in the morning. Dawn broke and darkness fell. Peng Liyun stood by the window in a daze. His thoughts drifted to who knows where. After a long time, his eyes rekindled and he sighed. His previous encounters and circumstances have become his valuable assets. Misfortune may be a blessing in disguise. Lu Cheng slowly opened his eyes. All the illusions had faded, and he saw that the room was small, with only one bed and one chair. He saw the beautiful girl looking at him with her bright eyes. This was reality. "How was it?" asked Yanjika expectantly, holding back her joy. "Not bad." Lu Cheng held himself back and smiled. The dragon gate had been leaped. All that was left was the process. At 9 in the morning at Fartuat port, ships approached one after another, covering the sea. They all waved the Chinese flag, which was greeted with cheers. Lu Cheng bade farewell to Peng Liyun and accompanied Yanjika on the departing passenger ship. 2 hours later they arrived at the ancient Acropolis. Shushan's study had already arranged a flight for the girl back home. It was a military flight. At the entrance of the airport, the couple stuck together for a while. Yanjika pursed her lips and smiled. She waved her hand and said, "Go on. I'll be more assured if you complete the mission now. I always do my best without harming myself." Lu Cheng smiled as he watched his wife leave. He took out his phone and called his master. "Hey brat, did you send Yanjika to a safe place?" asked Geezer Sher leisurely. "I sent her to the airport in Acropolis. Her flight is coming soon." Lu Cheng answered honestly. He then said, "Master, I have something to report to you." "What is it?" "Don't tell me you don't want to go to Nile?" asked Shi Jiangwo calmly. Lu Cheng cleared his throat and said, "Master, I've made the great leap." "What?" Geezer Sher picked his ear and coughed violently. After a long time he said, "You've become a physical invulnerability expert?" "Not yet. I'm still at the stage of stabilizing the connection. I'm not considered a complete physical invulnerability expert yet." Lu Cheng answered honestly and explained the whole story. "After Ku reached Dan equilibrium, I realized where my problem was. I found the inconsistency that prevented me from making a breakthrough before. Specifically, After the adjustment of the new visualization diagram, I met all the conditions, so I tried to make a breakthrough on my own. He didn't hide anything and told her the whole story down to the details. Tried to break through on his own. Geezer sure listened in silence. At the end he laughed dryly and said, "Not bad. Not bad." Speaking up to this point he added as if emphasizing, "You didn't let me down." Lu Qing smiled happily. He didn't say anything else and asked about the matter at hand. "Master, have you handed the information on Cirrus to the military? Is it okay if I contact them using the original method?" "Yes." "No," answered Geezer sure blankly. "That's good. I'll look for them right away." Lu Qing hung up. Beep beep beep. Hearing the remaining sound, Geezer sure was stunned for a full 5 seconds. He then drank a mouthful of wine and said, "You broke through just like that?" With his hands behind his back, he paced back and forth and fell into a dilemma. I have to tell Geezer G. Forget it. How do I tell him? I don't even know where to put my old face. That rascal. Geezer G will find out sooner or later. I won't tell him. After contacting the military and receiving the information, Lu Qing flipped through it seriously and got a general idea of the situation. Cirrus was a Nile mighty one in his 40s or 50s. He hadn't reached demigod and usually lived in Dika. On the night of the chaos, he took the initiative to contact the Chinese embassy and provided many secrets. With his strength, it wouldn't be a problem for him to evacuate from Nile if he wasn't targeted by experts. His core request was for follow-up protection. After some discussion, the military agreed. After that, Cirrus went to Kukhang in the middle of the night. He wanted to bring his son and family who were living there with him. However, he didn't return and couldn't be contacted. Looks like I have to go to Kukhang first. Lu Qing sat in the room of the passenger ship headed for Fartuat. He closed his eyes and communicated with the heavens and earth, stabilizing the connection bit by bit. Around him, the sun was dim and the shadows were as dark as night. Occasionally there would be bright flashes. In a building in Kukhang, Constantine, dressed in a black tuxedo, looked in the direction of the military base. He raised a glass of blood-red wine and said, "Satha has already sensed that something is amiss. The security is tight." As he spoke, his dark red cape fluttered lightly as if it had a life of its own. To Constantine's left, a mummy wrapped in bandages with only a beard on his head answered calmly, "We will have help." Constantine took a sip of wine and said thoughtfully, "Wouldn't it be too obvious if the Brotherhood's leaders, the Pharaoh's opponents, died one by one? Those who died seemed to be loyal to the Pharaoh." The mummy gave him a look that said, "You don't have to worry." "All right. Anyway, I have to drink a mouthful of Satha's blood," said Constantine with a nonchalant smile. The mummy waited for help and said casually, "From the information we received from the intelligence agency, Peng, one of the Chinese heavenly sons of the era, has become a demigod." So fast. Constantine was stunned at first. Then he chuckled with intoxicated eyes. A terrifying heavenly son of the era? His blood must be delicious and worth tasting. Chapter 602. In the afternoon, Lu Qing returned to Fartuat port. He didn't greet Consul Mao Xiaobing. Instead, he took a detour through the streets where there were occasional crossfires. He left the city on his own and entered the desert outside the oasis. The scorching sun hung high in the sky. The sunlight seemed to have lost all obstructions and filters, igniting the airflow and burning the sand. Everything that was visible to the naked eye was distorted like an illusion. While running, Lu Qing felt a major change in his resonance with heaven and earth. The darkness weakened, the coldness receded, and the brightness, heat, and heaviness became clearer and more intense. It was as if the cosmic map had been enlarged and locked on to the area enveloped by the stellar storm. It's no wonder physical invulnerability experts are so particular about geographical advantage. Different environments can indeed strengthen oneself and weaken one's enemy. With the addition and subtraction of one's environment, the effect is rather obvious. Comparatively speaking, with my balance of heat and cold and the rotation of ice and fire, I'm less restricted. Lu Qing nodded, deep in thought. He quickened his pace like a high-speed train, whizzing through the vast expanse of yellow sand, leaving behind a terrifying ravine. However, the ravine was quickly covered up by sand and filled in by the strong winds. After making the great leap, he was tempered by the feedback of heaven and earth. His body's strength increased again, but compared to before, there wasn't a substantial leap forward. Even if he continued to temper himself day and night and approach the forbidden zone, it would still be the same. He would become stronger but only to a limited extent. His greatest change was the sudden increase in his mental strength. The trickling streams converged into a surging river, allowing the ice mirror's range to expand from 1 to 10 meters. During battle, he could also borrow the power of the external world through resonance, increase the power of his punches and kicks, launch long-range attacks, or modify the environment to affect his opponent. As he wasn't a true physical invulnerability expert, his connection with heaven and earth wasn't stable enough. Lu Cheng's usage of the latter would be unstable. Of course, he had also considered an emergency solution, which was to use force concentration and the Dan formed by balancing and rotating to imitate the cultivators and temporarily reinforce them. As his thoughts raced, Lu Cheng was like a yellow dragon gliding close to the ground. He swept past the sand dunes and the occasional oasis. This time, in less than 2 hours before sunset, he saw Kukang City, known as the Pearl of Central Nile. It was connected to the famous desert to the west and the Isis River to the east. It was rich in minerals and many enterprises. Tall buildings rose and fell one after another. It could be considered a fairly modern city. In this area, it was only slightly worse than the capital of the Nile, Decca. The sky was blazing red. It was a magnificent sight, casting a crimson veil over the city. Lu Cheng circled around the edge of the huge oasis for a while and realized that there were checkpoints set up on several important roads. The soldiers were very disciplined. Other than occasionally stealing or taking some rewards, they didn't do anything out of the ordinary. It was a stark contrast to Tetons and Fartuat. 2 words popped into Lu Cheng's mind at the sight of this. Order. The actual ruler of Kukang is quite capable. He sighed inwardly. He didn't take the main road, but instead he climbed over many obstacles and quietly entered the city. Passing through a few streets, he saw remnants of crossfire, residents queuing for water with bitter expressions, and fanatical or numb pedestrians. As the Chinese consulate in Kukang was retreating to Decca, Lu Cheng didn't go there first. Instead, he followed the map and found the vicinity of Gunam Street, apartment 63. This was the residence of Cyrus's son Gulu. However, there seemed to have been an intense battle here. A few buildings were charred black, the windows were almost completely shattered, and there were clear bullet holes everywhere. In such an environment, the 3rd floor of apartment 63 was particularly eye-catching. The walls facing the street had all collapsed, revealing the dilapidated interior. It seemed to have been ravaged by a demolition team, so much so that it affected both the upper and lower floors. This was a battle between inhuman experts. One side's resistance was relatively short. Otherwise, the entire apartment would have collapsed. Lu Cheng stared at Gulu's residence and made a preliminary judgment. When Uncle Cyrus came to fetch his son and family, he was ambushed. With hostages, he might have surrendered quickly. Then who was the culprit? Lu Cheng looked around and saw that the place was in chaos. Other than corpses, wandering dogs, scurrying rats, and flying bugs, there wasn't a single living person. With the sporadic gunshots in the distance as a backdrop, it was exceptionally quiet and dead. At this moment, Lu Cheng's heart skipped a beat. He turned and looked behind him. Who's there? A black-haired, black-eyed man walked out from the half-collapsed shop. He was in his 30s and had weathered features. His eyes were resolute and one could tell he was Chinese. I'm Wang Dong, a special investigator from the military. You must be Lu Cheng? The man smiled and took out his identification. Lu Cheng had already retracted his interaction with his surroundings. He no longer had the feeling of disturbing heaven and earth. He nodded solemnly. Yes. Are you here to investigate Cyrus's whereabouts? He wasn't afraid of a sneak attack. Boldly taking the identification, he compared it with the information provided by the military. Wang Dong frowned slightly. After we lost contact with Cyrus, I came to Kukang and started the investigation. I arrived much earlier than you. At that time, there were still residents who hadn't evacuated. After some questioning and follow-up verification, we can basically confirm that Cyrus and his family were captured by the high priest of the Isis temple. They are currently being held in the temple and are waiting to be dealt with. The temple of Isis? High priest? Lu Cheng returned the identification to him. Wang Dong pondered for a moment and said, when Cyrus sought protection, he revealed many secrets, including the religious conflict in Nile. The Isis sect is loyal to the pharaoh, and the pharaoh seems to want to restore the ancient era of gods. In short, the high priest of the Isis sect in the local temple represents the will of the pharaoh to a certain extent. He isn't weak either, close to physical invulnerability. Previously, General Satha of the Brotherhood tried to kill him, but for some reason he failed. Other than him, There are 3 to 4 other inhuman mighty ones in the temple. All right. Do you have any more detailed information about the temple and the high priest? Asked Lu Qing. Quite a lot, including satellite images of the temple, visitors' self-drawn drawings, municipal construction plans. Wang Dong took out a bunch of things from his military backpack. With these, Lu Qing had a basic understanding of the temple's situation at night. However, he wasn't in a hurry to take action. Instead, he circled around the building in the dark. As though there was an opening in between his eyebrows, his spirit transformed into an invisible hand that extended to cover a 10-meter radius. Every detail was reflected in the ice mirror in his heart lake. No premonition of danger. The Inhumans are a certain distance away. Lu Qing stopped in his tracks and said to Wang Dong, "Have you made arrangements for the evacuation?" "Yes." Wang Dong replied in a deep voice. "Then I'll take action." Lu Qing nodded lightly. "Be careful." Wang Dong couldn't help but remind him. "All right." Lu Qing didn't say much. He turned around, extended his hand and pressed against a protrusion on the wall. He leaped into the air and landed on the edge of a window on the 3rd floor. With a tug of his shoulder, he exerted precise force and directly unloaded the window, placing it flat silently. Leaping in, there was no one inside. Lu Qing leaned against the door and listened carefully. After sensing carefully for a while, he suddenly opened the door and rushed out. At this moment, there were only 2 guards left in the corridor. They instinctively looked over. Drawing the ancient words in his mind, his eyes were cold and sharp. Lu Qing only took one look at the 2 strong guards, and it was enough to make them break down mentally. Snot and tears flowed down their faces as though they had encountered a monster from the depths of hell. After the qualitative change of his spirit, the effect of Lu Qing's simplified army formula had more than doubled. Taking a step forward, he raised both hands and struck out with a karate chop. Lu Qing knocked the 2 guards unconscious. He circled the circular corridor and rushed to the opposite side silently. That's the high priest's room. Lu Qing's plan was to capture the ringleader first. He didn't want to waste time trying to find out where Cirrus and his family were being held. His heartbeat slowed down and his breathing weakened. The surface of his body was covered with coldness, which allowed him to avoid the infrared alarm. There's more than one person in the room. Lu Qing stopped outside the door. Like a god looking down, he used the ice mirror to reflect the blurry situation inside. In this aspect, there was indeed a qualitative difference between an inhuman and a physical invulnerability expert. 2 inhumans, but they are in different small rooms. One of them feels stronger and there are a few of them with average strength or even none. They are together with the weaker inhumans. At this point, Lu Qing understood what was going on. Cirrus and his family were being held in the secret room of the high priest's residence. Just nice, Lu Qing thought to himself. After pondering over the next few details, he suddenly opened the door and entered. The high priest immediately sensed it and stood up from the recliner. He saw a black shadow approaching him and heard the roar of a strong wind. He swung his arms agilely, one up and one down, one blocking and one attacking. Dim light gathered. He wasn't stingy with this. He tried to create a bigger commotion to attract the other mighty ones in the temple. At this moment, a bone-chilling wind that seemed to have come from the depths of the North Pole blew on him, causing him to shiver involuntarily. As he shivered, his strength weakened and his speed slowed down. Lu Qing's right fist was already coming down on his forearm. Before entering the school, Lu Qing had prepared a severe warning. He wanted to use it to attract the north wind from the outside world. Bam! Amidst the low sound of the collision, the high priest, who was caught off guard, was momentarily dazed as though he had been frozen. Lu Qing wouldn't let this go. His left palm struck out at lightning speed and knocked his opponent unconscious. In a breath's time, the outcome was decided. Ambushers did have a huge advantage. He extended his leg and the high priest fell silently before lying down again. Without further delay, Lu Qing found the secret room, broke the lock and entered. "Who is it?" asked a tanned, muscular, black-haired, blue-eyed elder weakly. He seemed to have been injected with some kind of drug. Before Lu Qing could answer, the elder blurted out in surprise after seeing the other party's appearance. "You're Shi's disciple?" "Yes, Mr. Cirrus?" Lu Qing sought confirmation. Feeling the cold wind and the interaction between the other party's body and the outside world, the blue-eyed elder nodded, puzzled and delighted. "I'm Cirrus." After answering, he muttered to himself, "I didn't say he was that strong. Let's leave this place first." Lu Qing looked around and made a decision. In a building near the military base, Constantine looked at the mummy with a bored expression. Is your helper not here yet? Probably until daybreak, replied the mummy calmly. At this moment, someone came in and whispered a few words to the guard outside. The guard turned around and knocked on the door, inviting the mummy out. After a while, the mummy came back and said to Constantine, "Something happened at the temple. There's a little worm causing trouble. I'm going to deal with it." Constantine shrugged and said, "Come back quickly. Don't let me get bored." Chapter 603. In the Isis temple, Lu Qing and the rest had just walked out of the secret chamber when Sirius looked around and saw the high priest lying unconscious on the recliner. He didn't say much and walked weakly at the back of the group. When he passed by the lounge chair, he suddenly squatted down and leaned against it. Gathering all his remaining strength, he smashed his elbow into the high priest's neck, breaking his throat and breaking his cervical vertebrae. Without a sound, he went to meet Mother Earth. This turn of events was out of Lu Cheng's expectations. He looked over in shock and blurted out, "Mr. Sirius?" In order to prevent the high priest from waking up and causing any accidents, he had used the reflector to monitor the surroundings. He didn't expect Sirius to suddenly attack, and it was too late to stop him. Sirius supported himself on the armrest and stood up while panting. He revealed a smile and said, "If he's alive, he'll expose us. You don't want to have 2, 3, or even a few demigods chasing after you, right?" "Of course. Kukang definitely doesn't have that many experts. I'm just giving an extreme example." His son and daughter-in-law were extremely frightened. They each covered the mouth of a child to prevent them from screaming uncontrollably. Lu Qing thought for a few seconds and nodded thoughtfully. He turned around and led Sirius and his family back the way they came. From the place where the window was removed, he threw them one by one. Special investigator Wang Dong caught them one by one. The entire process was carried out silently and didn't disturb the stray dogs and cats nearby. In the end, Lu Qing created a vibration and sent a voice transmission to his companions, "You guys leave first. I'll take care of the aftermath. We'll meet at the predetermined location." "What aftermath?" Wang Dong was confused, but his professionalism didn't allow him to delay. He led Sirius and his family away and disappeared into the night. Lu Qing turned around and snuck into the high priest's room again. Due to the privacy of the higher-ups, there were only surveillance devices in the secret chamber. This time he used his fists and legs to control his muscles, fascia, and force. He used the friction between them and the air to counteract the sound of his body shattering the tables and chairs, cracking the walls and burning the floor. If there was an outsider here, he would definitely be horrified. It was as if Lu Qing was fighting a silent battle with an invisible ghost. Everything was like a silent color film at the beginning of the last century. Such control was extremely demanding, and Lu Qing didn't have the supernatural ability of sonic wave. If it weren't for the qualitative change in his mind and the improvement in his realm of all-seeing God, he definitely wouldn't have been able to complete such a feat. Even so, he had no choice but to slow down his movements to ensure precision. In the end, he was sweating profusely. After a little looting, he filled a luggage bag with gold and jewels. They all had the unique charm of the Nile, and there was no lack of antiques among them. When he was done, Lu Qing left the high priest's room with his back bowed and back bent. He circled the circular corridor like a ghost and returned to his original spot. He leaped down from the 3rd floor, which had lost its window. He retracted his chi and blood in midair, adjusted his strength and landed steadily and silently. Like a civet cat, he blended into the darkness. A few minutes later, the patrolling guards discovered their comrade who had fainted. They then noticed the abnormality in the high priest's residence. Another 15 minutes later, Lu Qing saw Wang Dong, Sirius, and a few others in a parking lot in the north of Kukang. The engine of a modified SUV was still running, and it was ready to leave. "Why are you going back?" Wang Dong asked in a seemingly casual manner. "Thanks to Senior Sirius's teachings, I've learned a lot. I'm going back to leave some evidence for them." Lu Qing smiled and sighed. He glanced at Sirius and replied in Huanatian. "Evidence?" Wang Dong was half puzzled and half guessing. "Are you trying to mislead the possible pursuers?" "Yes. Let's first assume that there are experts at the temple who are adept at tracking. It's better to be prepared," explained Lu Qing. Wang Dong nodded thoughtfully. He turned around and opened the door to the driver's seat. "Let's talk on the way." At the temple, the mummy rushed to the high priest's room and observed the scene. Aside from his face, his exposed skin was wrapped in yellowish-white bandages. His face was covered with a thick beard that concealed his facial features. "An intense battle, but no one heard it," muttered the mummy softly. He made a judgment. The attacker should have the supernatural ability to block out sound. His standard is slightly higher than the high priest's. The fact that they could fight to such an extent in a surprise attack was enough to show the level of the attacker. At this thought, the mummy turned to the remaining priests. Did you see anything from the surveillance? Yes. A skinny priest asked the supervisor in charge of surveillance to bring in a laptop and replay the surveillance footage. There was footage of Lu Qing jumping to the third floor and dismantling the window. There was footage of him attacking two guards and knocking them unconscious. There was footage of him returning and collecting a group of loot bags. In these videos, due to Lu Cheng's deliberate evasiveness, his face was never recorded. They could only determine that he was an Asian based on his facial features. Why didn't you discover him on the spot? Asked the mummy in a deep voice. It happened in the blink of an eye. If you don't slow down the video, it's hard to determine if it's an illusion or reality, explained the supervisor in a fluster. More importantly, there were so many cameras and so many images. The temple had never placed much emphasis on the power of technology. He didn't have many subordinates and it was late at night. How could they discover something that happened in a flash? The mummy glanced at the supervisor coldly. That's your problem. As soon as he finished, he reached out and grabbed the supervisor by the neck, lifting the fat and round man up. No. The supervisor's voice was choked out in his throat, like the cry of a dying rooster. His hands and feet struggled a few times but they quickly lost their strength. His moist skin quickly weathered and dried up. In less than 30 seconds he lost all signs of life and turned into a real mummy. Thump. The mummy loosened his grip and let the supervisor fall to the floor. I'll go and catch them, said the mummy in a deep voice. The mummy said in a low voice. Then he muttered in anger and disdain, an inhuman from China. A greedy inhuman. He took out a bandage and wrapped it around his head again and again, leaving only his two eyeballs uncovered. At first glance he was already a real mummy. Even his aura had become dim, faintly discernible, as if he was dead. The aura of life, the taste of life. The mummy opened his arms and embraced nature, muttering cryptically. His surroundings instantly turned dark. In the tiniest places, there seemed to be oil stains shining. There were strange light spots rising in a riot of colors, swaying in the air, each different from the other. It was as if the underworld had descended, causing the priests to lower their noble heads. Found you, said the mummy suddenly. Before he could finish his sentence, his figure had already disappeared from the room. Under the night sky, the heat of the day dissipated. The surrounding yellow sand was quiet. A modified MPV sped along Route 76. Lu Cheng's suggestion for a retreat was that the situation in Dika was chaotic and easy to intercept. Why not go south to Bori town and head to the port city of Fartuat? To this, Wang Dong and Cirrus both agreed. As the car sped past, the silent desert beside the road suddenly moved, forming a human-shaped sand sculpture. The sand sculpture shook, and the sand on the surface fell off, revealing the mummy with his face covered in bandages and a pair of deep, flickering eyes. He sprinted at full speed and finally caught up with his target. As for the priests, he didn't want them to be a hindrance, thinking that they would slow him down, so he didn't bring them along. Looking at the taillights of the car, the mummy's bandages moved, revealing an undetectable smile. Humph, he said softly, then sank back into the yellow sand. In the MPV, Cirrus couldn't help but praise after hearing what Lu Cheng had done. Not bad. This will make the people of the deity temple think that the opponent isn't strong, so the number of experts they send to chase after us will be limited. I hope so. If the priests had swarmed me, I would have had no choice but to run. Mr. Cirrus, how's your recovery? Asked Lu Cheng with concern. Once I stop injecting for more than an hour, the medicine won't be able to suppress me anymore. Cirrus flexed his arms and smiled happily. I'm halfway recovered. Lu Cheng was about to speak again when he felt a premonition. He turned to look out of the window. The gentle and peaceful yellow sand under the moonlight had turned violent. It was dyed black and was surging towards them grain by grain. No, that's not yellow sand. Those are tiny insects that completely covered the color of the yellow sand. They were densely packed and uncountable, making one's scalp tingle. Cirrus's grandson saw this and let out a tragic cry. Lu Cheng made a prompt decision and opened the door forcefully. He jumped out of the car, knelt on one knee and punched the ground. Bam! Just as his fist hit the ground, rings of scarlet and white flames rippled outwards. With the support of heaven and earth, the power extended. The flames rippled and passed through the car, engulfing the black waves. Whenever the scarlet and white flames came into contact, the tiny insects would immediately explode. They didn't leave behind any corpses, as though they had returned directly to the underworld. Rings after rings, waves after waves. With Lu Qing as the center within a radius of 50 to 60 meters, the black turned into powder. The ground was clean, revealing the yellow sand. After the punch, Lu Qing visualized and adjusted his organs. He aimed another punch at the opposite side. This time he treated the ground as his opponent and used internal explosion. Internal explosion of the physical invulnerability level. Rumble. The surface of the ground exploded, causing the surroundings to shake. Not far from Lu Qing, a black figure felt the pressure and uncontrollably crawled out from the yellow sand. A yellowish-white bandage covered his face, making him look demonic and evil. The mummy narrowed his eyes and almost blurted out, "Demigod. A physical invulnerability expert from China." Chapter 604. In that instant, what he had seen in the video, what he had seen at the scene, and the reality before his eyes flashed across the mummy's mind. He was certain that he had fallen into a well-designed trap. He was best at mental attacks. Against the Chinese Inhumans who had yet to undergo qualitative changes, he had an overwhelming advantage. Even if he was pincered by 2 or 3 of them, he was confident of winning quickly. However, once he encountered a demigod, even if his opponent's level hadn't stabilized, the effects would be greatly reduced. He might be able to win in the end, but it would definitely be a tough battle. And in a tough battle, his opponent would have the advantage in numbers. If Cyrus or his companions displayed decent strength, the outcome would be rather dangerous. Besides, the mummy had expended a lot of energy chasing after him. Even if he fought alone, he might not be able to win against the enemy who was resting in the car. More importantly, who knew if there were other demigods? Retreat. I have to retreat. I have to retreat as soon as possible. With a quick thought, the mummy made up his mind. However, in a battle of the same level, it would be more dangerous to retreat without a care. It was equivalent to leaving the clash of auras and the space behind him to the enemy. If he wanted to retreat, he had to advance first. He had to break the enemy's momentum and create an opportunity. In a flash, the mummy covered a distance of more than 20 meters and threw a punch at Lu Qing's face. Behind him, there were remnants of images, some fading slowly, some appearing clearly. They overlapped one another, forming a long tape of negatives. These images were like the wake of a jet, pushing one another forward. In the end, they gave the mummy the momentum to charge forward. In the blink of an eye, he had closed in on his opponent. The aura of the mansion of the dead enveloped him in an attempt to intimidate him. His fist was also reflected in Lu Cheng's starry eyes. The mummy's fist was wrapped in white bandages. Corpse oil seeped out from the inside, dyeing it a disgusting yellowish-brown color. A nauseating and dizzying stench filled the air. Whoosh! A gust of wind blew around him. Black gas gathered and turned into tiny worms. As the mummy's fist struck, they drilled into various parts of Lu Cheng's body, especially his eyes, nostrils, ears, temples, and other areas. The black scripture of the undead and the fist of the dead were both poisonous and strange. Lu Cheng seemed to have been shaken by the terrifying and eerie pressure of the mansion of the dead. His reaction was delayed by half a beat. He only regained his senses when the fist was about to hit him and the black worm drilled into his body. He hurriedly raised his right arm to block in front of him. Bang! As soon as the mummy's fist touched his sleeve, his arm moved back at the same speed as the mummy's. He did not bear too much force, as if they had agreed to do such a difficult performance in advance. As Lu Cheng retracted his arm, his chi, blood, spirit, force, and even the black worm that had entered his body collapsed into his dantian. Inside the vast starry sky, under the control of his will and the guidance of his mind, which were many times more powerful than before, dazzling lights flashed and formed the ancient word fighting, that would never admit defeat. Zzzzzzzzzzzzz. In that instant, the rest of the black worms seemed to have drilled into the lifeless body of a dead person. Having lost their target, they could only scatter helplessly. The former was compressed by the millstone and melted like snow when it was burned by the fire force. Just as Lu Cheng's arm was about to hit his chest, the muscles on his arm suddenly bulged and thickened by more than 3 times. Bruises appeared on his arm as his large tendons protruded, filled with pure strength. Boom! Lu Cheng bent his elbow and swung his arm back, colliding head-on with the mummy's fist, which had lost its momentum. Due to the distortion of his muscles and fascia, an explosive sound rang out. The yellowish-brown bandage trembled slightly. The mummy seemed to have heard the strange sound of his own bones. He quickly moved his shoulder and used the force to pull back his fist. He floated back more than 10 meters, like a kite that had its string cut and regained its freedom. Lu Qing took a step forward with his right foot and shifted his body horizontally. As he retracted and released his dantian force, his left fist was covered in thick and heavy white flames. He struck the air between the two of them. Whoosh! The air within a radius of more than 10 meters was ignited, turning into countless flame fairies. Summoned by Lu Cheng's fist, they pounced on the mummy from all directions. Moths. Fire Sex 116 style, moths. After making the great leap and connecting heaven and earth, Lu Qing didn't need to do any prelude and could use it directly. As long as it was something evil, there was no mistake in using fire. In the mummy's eyes, the densely packed moths were pouncing on him with no regard for their own safety. The high temperature curled up the frayed edges of his clothes. The yellowish-white bandage also became moist, as though some kind of oil was melting. Anger flashed in his eyes. He raised both his arms and let out a terrifying roar. Black smoke rose and a dark hurricane suddenly appeared around the mummy. It connected to the top and spun wildly, expanding in all directions and swallowing all the moths. In the distance, Wang Dong and Cirrus, who were about to get out of the car to help, felt dizzy. It was as though they had seen a wolf-headed grim reaper with a giant scythe. Their minds went blank and they stood rooted to the ground, almost driving the MPV off the road. Dark Scripture of the Dead, Anubis's Call. Lu Qing quickly outlined the forwarding formula in his mind and suppressed all his fear. His right fist condensed a blazing white fireball with hints of purple. He threw it at the mummy in the middle of the hurricane. Fire Sex 36 style, Devour. At this moment, the mummy suddenly stomped forward. It seemed like he was exerting force, but he landed silently on the surface of the road. Whoosh! The sound of the wind intensified to the extreme. The dark hurricane collapsed and enveloped Lu Qing. At the same time, the yellow sand at the edge of the desert turned into hidden weapons that whizzed towards Lu Qing. They were denser and more dangerous than the moths. Dark Scripture of the Dead, Sandstorm. Boom! The fireball, which had been condensed to the maximum, exploded. A blazing white light flashed past, almost blinding the mummy's eyes. The subsequent shockwave swept away a lot of sand and crashed into the mummy's body. Within the shockwave, the red light surged and swallowed everything. The mummy closed his eyes and raised his arms to block in front of his body. A dim light shone. As the shockwave came crashing, he retreated and used the momentum to turn around. In an instant, he had entered the desert and was running towards Kukhang in the north. This was the first time Lu Qing encountered such a decisive mighty one. He couldn't help but reflect on his choice of moves. As thoughts flashed through his mind, he was already chasing after the mummy in the remaining sand. He couldn't let the mummy escape so easily. If he returned to Kukhang and called for help, with his tracking ability, things would become very troublesome. Even though it was difficult to kill a physical invulnerability expert, and he might not be able to stop this mighty one dressed as a mummy, he had to chase him in another direction and buy enough time for Cirrus and his family to evacuate. Bam bam bam. Lu Qing moved forward. Between turns he stepped forward with the walk of you. Strong winds blew, blowing the sand away. Thump, thump, thump. With large strides he cut through the yellow sand and chased after the mummy. With one fleeing and one chasing, the two quickly disappeared from the eyes of Wang Dong and Cirrus, leaving behind a long yellow sand dragon that hadn't settled down yet. Let's go. Wang Dong was experienced. He understood Lu Cheng's intentions in an instant. He decisively started the MPV and drove as fast as he could. Aren't we going to help? Cirrus was stunned. No, we might not be able to catch up. Even if we could, we might not be able to stop that physical invulnerability expert, demigod. If we keep pestering him like this, we won't be able to leave when his helpers arrive. Wang Dong explained as he drove. Lu Qing is alone. He can fight and leave as he pleases. This makes him more agile and safer. We need to reach Fartuad as soon as possible and leave Nile. This is the biggest help we can give him. Cirrus was also a person who had seen blood on the tip of his blade. After some thought, he understood the crux of the matter and didn't say anything else. Two sandstorm dragons appeared in the desert. The distance between the head and tail increased and decreased at times. With a turn they went around a sand dune. Lu Qing saw the bright moon and quiet sand. There was no trace of the mummy. A thought flashed through his mind. He expanded the range of the ice mirror. It was as though he could hear the subtle movements of insects in the depths of the yellow sand. The gentle undulations under his feet disappeared in an instant. Lu Cheng's eyes shone. He retracted his qi and force and brought out the human body Big Dan that looked like a miniature universe. This time he didn't need to rely on external forces. Using his own willpower and spirit, he gathered the stars and created the absolute darkness and coldness at the edge of the universe. Bam! Lu Cheng stepped out with his right foot and stomped down, sinking into the yellow sand. In an instant, with his feet as the center, the sand froze. Crystals appeared and spread in all directions, drilling deeper. Self-created unique skill, Lament of the Ice Queen, complete version. Crack. More than 10 meters away, the yellow sand and ice crumbled, turning into bullets that shot towards Lu Cheng. They covered the sky and covered the earth. The mummy leaped out and fled again. With a swallowing punch, Lu Cheng dispersed the hidden weapons and continued his pursuit. 3 hours later, at the edge of the desert outside Kukang City, he stopped at the same spot, frowning slightly. He had completely lost track of the mummy. A physical invulnerability mighty one sure isn't easy to kill. Lu Cheng's thoughts turned into a sigh. Along the way he had blocked the mummy's path and occasionally exchanged blows. He had forced the mummy to change directions more than a dozen times. It took him a long time to return to Kukang. At this time, as long as Wang Dong and the rest hadn't gotten into a car accident, they should be near Fartuat. Even if the mummy found help and crossed the desert, it would be too late to stop them. Once they arrived, the military would arrange for them to leave the port on a night boat and bid farewell to Nile. Of course, since this arrangement wasn't communicated beforehand, it might take some time. That would be the chance for the mummy and his help. I'll hide in the east of Kukang City. If the mummy really does find help and cross the desert to Fartuat, I'll harass them along the way and try my best to buy time. Lu Cheng quickly made up his mind. He circled to the east of the city, adjusted his breathing and circulated his ice force. Following the train of thought of the cultivation techniques, he hid his presence and blended into the darkness. He rested and recovered while monitoring the edge of the desert. Back then Guhui could even fool his sense of danger. After obtaining the complete set of cultivation techniques, Lu Cheng studied the content diligently and turned it into his own use. In a building near the military base, Constantine held a glass of red wine and looked at the disheveled mummy in astonishment. He said in amusement, "That's right. You met a giant reptile? Lu Cheng from China. He has become a demigod, although it's not stable yet," replied the mummy gloomily. Fortunately his face was bandaged. Otherwise, Constantine would have seen his face turn red from embarrassment and anger. In the 3-hour tug-of-war, he had exhausted a lot of energy and almost died at Lu Cheng's hands. If Kukang had been a few dozen kilometers away, he probably wouldn't have made it back. Lu Cheng is at the Terra Grade 2? Constantine's eyes lit up. "Are you interested?" asked the mummy sharply. Constantine took a sip of red wine and laughed maniacally. "Of course. I've wanted his ability to foresee danger for a long time. If it weren't for Ji and Shi from China informing the great teacher in Kontsev, I would have used his girlfriend to make a move. Alright, I'll admit it. When I first noticed him, he was already a little stronger than me. As for now, I believe the taste of his blood will be even better. Both of you are at the Terra Grade. Both of you have just reached the Terra Grade," reminded the mummy coldly. "You might not be able to defeat him." Constantine wasn't annoyed. Instead, he laughed and spread his arms. "The blood of the Savior flows in my body. There's already a qualitative difference between us." The mummy was about to say something when he sensed something. "Our helper is here. P.S. When I went to the hospital previously, the doctor suggested I get in 4 drip. I was a little hesitant at the time because I felt it wasn't good for my body. Then I continued to take medicine and apply it. Today I'm obviously getting better. Although it's still growing, it's not much longer. The more serious areas have also improved. I'll go for a follow-up tomorrow and see what the doctor says. If it's quick, I'll be back to normal the day after tomorrow." Chapter 605. Helper. Hearing the mummy's affirmation, Constantine was stunned for a moment because he did not notice any powerhouses approaching. In this aspect he was sure that he was much stronger than the mummy. How could he not notice anything when the mummy spoke first? Could it be that the person who came was strong enough to hide from his senses and used a special method to inform the mummy? Seeing the doubt in Constantine's eyes, the mummy's facial muscles pulled at the bandages and opened his mouth. "Listen carefully. Listen." Constantine closed his eyes and tilted his head slightly, focusing on listening to the movement outside. However, there was still no terror-grade movement. Instead, there was the roar of motors, the rotation of tracks, and orderly footsteps in the distance. There was a lot of it, but it was orderly. An army? Constantine opened his eyes and a red light flashed. The 35th Nile Fully Mechanized Division. The mummy gave an affirmative answer. One of the 5 trump-card armies that are most loyal to the pharaoh. They should have built a wartime airport in the wild. Their commander, Lieutenant General Amon, is also a demigod, the terror grade you mentioned. Constantine took a sip of red wine and asked in confusion, "Isn't this a secret operation? Why do we have to join the army? Do you want me to not be able to return to America?" Satha lives in the base. There are many generals of the Brotherhood there, many armies, various high-tech equipment, and many powerful weapons. If we encounter them in the wild and are not trapped in a fixed place, we don't have to be too afraid. However, if we want to sneak into the base or even attack it directly, the 2 of us will only lose our lives. Even with Amon's help, the outcome will not change. The best way to deal with a military fortress is to send a fully armed army and bomb it with fighter jets, the mummy explained in a low voice. After that, he added, Satha has already noticed the pharaoh's intentions and will definitely respond. This matter cannot be delayed any longer. After all, there is only one place left. When the situation stabilizes and the pharaoh returns, the international community can say whatever they want. At most, we will just throw a few scapegoats. All right. Constantine turned around and walked to the window. Through the thin curtains, he looked down at the street below. He saw armored vehicles, main battle tanks, and rocket launchers moving at a steady speed toward the military base not far away. A war was about to break out. The sound of footsteps echoed throughout the building as if announcing the arrival of a powerhouse. Dong dong dong. In less than a minute, someone knocked on the door. The rhythm was slow and extremely polite. "General Amon, please come in," the mummy said politely. With a creak, the door was pushed open, revealing a man in a brownish-green military uniform. He had black hair that reached his ears, and his blue eyes were like gems formed from the sea. His facial features were well-defined, and he could be called a handsome man in the Nile style. Through his own channels, Satha informed various countries that he accused the pharaoh of staging a coup and slaughtering dissidents. He requested the international community to send an observation team to investigate. He claimed to have accurate and conclusive evidence. Lieutenant General Amon glanced at Constantine and said in a deep voice, "We don't have much time left." Following his words, several formations of bombers, under the cover of fighter jets, flew past the window and swept toward the military base. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Lu Qing, who was hiding in the east, heard the continuous explosions and felt the earth tremble slightly. Slightly stunned, he left his hiding spot and went up to the top floor of a tall building. Looking at the direction of the commotion, he saw flames rising from the military base. In the end, the flames didn't go out for a long time. In the air, there was the sound of airplanes flying at low altitudes. The rebels and the regular army are exchanging fire again? It looks intense. Lu Qing didn't have any information to back it up, so he could only make a guess based on his impression. However, there was one thing he was sure of. The mummy from before probably didn't have the time to find reinforcements to chase after Fartuat. In other words, Cyrus and his family were completely safe. Should I take this opportunity to find a physical invulnerability expert to practice? Or should I leave Kukhang and look for another opportunity in Dika? In a battlefield where airplanes are deployed, it's very easy for them to get hurt by accident and interfere. Lu Qing muttered to himself thoughtfully. For a moment he was a little hesitant. Just as he reached the bottom of the building with his hand, he suddenly noticed a long trail of yellow sand in the desert east of Kukhang. A figure was approaching at high speed. Another physical invulnerability expert? Seems like it's still a little lacking. It's similar to me. Lu Qing made a sharp judgment. Silently traversing through the darkness where all the streetlights were out, he arrived at the location where the figure was supposed to enter Kukhang. A strong gust of wind blew, and a figure was rapidly approaching. Lu Qing was shocked when he saw who it was. It was Renli. Morning Star Renli. Why did she come here? Lu Qing quickly removed the concealment of his aura, stepped out of the corner and revealed himself. Renli slowed down, frowned and spoke first. Why are you here? She was wearing a light green martial arts suit, carrying a weapon wrapped in a brass scabbard. Her straight hair was tied into a ponytail, and her doll-like face didn't show any signs of dust. Her big, bright eyes were full of vigor, as bright as the morning stars. Lu Cheng thought for a few seconds before asking in a serious and tactful manner, "Where do you think this is? Isn't this Dika?" Renli was experienced and asked immediately. "I knew it." Lu Cheng almost covered his face and sighed. He answered honestly, "This is Kukang." "Kukang? Which country is Kukang from?" Renli asked guiltily. "It's also from Nile, but it's 300 kilometers south of Dika," Lu Cheng explained patiently. He couldn't help but curse in his heart. How thick-skinned must the elders of Kongtong School be to allow such a person to train in the war-torn zones? Aren't they afraid that she'll find the headquarters of a strong enemy? Renli came to a realization and said confidently, "They didn't warn me." "They?" Lu Cheng looked left and right. Renli explained a little embarrassedly, "I have a GPS device and a satellite phone on me. If I go the wrong way they'll call to correct me." "Not really. Look, you just have to take a turn and keep going straight and you'll be in Dika," Lu Cheng said perfunctorily. "Theoretically speaking, this sentence is true everywhere." "I see. So I didn't lose myself." Renli whispered happily and proudly, increasing her confidence. She looked Lu Cheng up and down, then smiled and said, "I heard from Priest that you just made a breakthrough." "That's great. So did I. However, I was delayed for a day and took a detour for another day. I didn't meet Priest at Fartuat, so I had to meet him at Dika. Based on the way you're going, you might not meet him at Dika?" Lu Cheng was about to speak when another explosion sounded from the military base in the distance. Wave after wave, they almost merged into one. In the blink of an eye, they converged into a violent commotion, making the entire city feel like it was quaking. Was the ammunition depot blown up? While Lu Cheng was guessing, Renli's eyes lit up. "Is there a battle over there? It sounds intense." "Yes." Lu Cheng didn't hide it. "Let's go take a look, observe and learn," Renli suggested excitedly. "If we meet a lone physical invulnerability expert, I'll let you have a go first." She makes it sound like a child giving a pear. Lu Cheng already had such thoughts. Without hesitation, he said decisively, "Okay. But you mustn't be reckless and provoke." Don't be reckless." He swallowed the words provoke back into his stomach. "Don't worry, I'm very experienced," Renli said sincerely. "I'm a martial artist who has been honed in the war-torn zones for a long time." Lu Cheng kept his words and rushed towards the military base before Renli, who was leading the way confidently. They restrained their speed and diverted some of their energy to be on guard against their surroundings. At the same time, they concealed their movements and almost blended into the darkness like ghosts. As they neared the battlefield, they found a tall building nearby. Through the shattered outer layer of the building, they either pushed, swayed, or jumped. In less than 20 seconds, they climbed to the rooftop and looked at the military base from afar. Flames and smoke filled his eyes. The sound of cannons and gunshots rang in his ears. Everything was like a scene from a blockbuster movie. For a moment, Lu Cheng was a little dazed. At this moment, he saw from the corner of his eye that, not far from the base, there was a similar scene of light, explosions and exaggerated collisions. More importantly, the surface of the buildings there was weathering. The wind was strong and there was rain of fire and black fog in the air. A battle between physical invulnerability experts. Renli wrinkled her nose. She had also noticed the situation there. Her eyes lit up. Without waiting for her suggestion, Lu Cheng said, "Let's go take a look first. Be careful and don't get discovered." "Okay." Renli carried her sword and rushed to the edge of the rooftop. Then she leaped into the air and jumped to the roof of a shorter building dozens of meters away. As though she was riding the wind, her speed was extremely fast. She landed quietly and stood steadily. Lu Cheng knew that he didn't have the ability to lift something heavy as though it was light. After all, everyone had their own strengths. Thus he decided to withdraw his chi and blood while running. As his Dan force exploded, his legs swelled, and the edge of the rooftop collapsed with a bang. He successfully jumped to Renli's side. The two of them shuttled through the urban jungle and soon approached the battlefield of physical invulnerability experts. They looked down from a tall building that had peeled off its surface. At this moment, Lu Cheng was using the art of concealment of chi and spirit. His gaze was indistinct and didn't disturb the battle below. Renli also used the unique skills of Kongtong School. A strong gust of wind blew past her and covered her movements. At a glance, Lu Cheng saw a familiar face. It was the expert dressed like a mummy who was chasing after Cyrus and his family. Satha didn't expect the pharaoh to be so decisive as to mobilize his ace division to attack his base. When the situation was in chaos and his army was on the verge of collapse, he led a few leaders of the Brotherhood and secretly escaped from the fortress, in an attempt to escape. Who knew that with the combination of Constantine's super senses in the dark and the mummy's ability to sense living things, they were quickly discovered. They were ambushed and lost 2 leaders in an instant. Now, Satha was facing off against Constantine and Lieutenant General Aman alone. While he was in danger, he was constantly looking for an opportunity to escape. He knew that once the mummy finished off the remaining 2 leaders, he wouldn't be able to escape even if he wanted to. "Sai, I can't fall sick no matter what. However, I've been taking medicine for a few days now and my mental state is still a little weak. Let me have a good rest tomorrow night. I'll officially return to the second watch the day after tomorrow. It'll still be the same old time." Chapter 606. Compared to the young Aman and the newly promoted Constantine, Satha was definitely a veteran physical invulnerability mighty one. If he were in China, even if he didn't get a title, he would definitely be rated as a first pin expert. As he dodged and dodged, he didn't show any signs of losing, but he was still at a disadvantage. His fists were spewing fire, which disturbed the surroundings. Even the environment was affected. Crimson rain fell from the sky like stars. While it was interfering with his opponent's movement, 6 symmetrical wings quickly condensed on his back. The burning and steaming wings made him look like an angel walking on the earth. After the 6 wings were completed, Satha made a prompt decision. He straightened his back and turned the crimson feathers into arrows that whizzed towards Constantine and Aman. These arrows glowed with flames. Once they came into contact, they would immediately explode with continuous rumbles. It was as if dozens or hundreds of RPGs had been fired at the same time. Of course, the individual arrows weren't as powerful because they were scattered, but it was still a spectacular sight. Satha's trump card, Fury of the Fire Angel. Rumble. 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 Streaks of light flew everywhere, and the crimson flames spread like waves. Neither Aman nor Constantine dared to face this attack head-on. They each took a few steps back, dodging and blocking. Now's the time. Satha stomped on the ground, cracking the cement road. His entire body was like a phantom, dragging a long tail behind him as he sped into the distance. Suddenly, a dim light flashed and a crimson light appeared. Constantine's figure had caught up to Satha in the blink of an eye. His full speed and short-distance sprinting speed were like man-made lightning, much faster than this veteran demigod. At this moment, Satha stopped without warning. His feet stepped onto the road as if he had never run before. Pah, pah, pah. With a leap, the surface of his fist was ignited. A blazing white light clung to it as if it was enveloping and covering it. In the midst of the clash, Constantine didn't have time to do anything else. He reached out his right palm, opened his glowing fingers and grabbed his enemy's fist. Boom. The blazing white light on Satha's fist exploded in advance, pushing his wrist to change direction. Using a strange trajectory, he avoided Constantine's grab and hit his opponent's abdomen. His escape just now was not a real escape but a counterattack. He had already noticed Constantine's terrifying speed. He knew that if he kept running he would be caught sooner or later. When Aman and the mummy surrounded him, everything would be over. If he wanted to escape, he had to attack first. First, he had to severely wound Dark Knight Bat and destroy his ability to catch up. For this reason, Satha did not hesitate to use the old man's assassination technique. In a short moment, this veteran demigod demonstrated his wisdom, perseverance, decisiveness, and strength. No physical invulnerability expert came for free. Bang! Blood and flesh exploded, and his intestines writhed like snakes. Constantine looked at the exaggerated wound on his lower abdomen in disbelief. Satha, on the other hand, did not even look at him. His body bounced back, and his right leg tightened into an iron rod, and he whipped it between the enemy's legs. If this kick connected, he would borrow the force to run forward and truly escape. Poof! Satha's right leg missed. Just as his heart tightened, a milky white light exploded in front of him. It was so blinding that he couldn't open his eyes. In his senses, the rain of fire around him seemed to have been doused with dust or ice water, extinguishing with a sizzling sound. Not good, Satha muttered to himself. Before he could retract his right leg, blazing white flames spurted out of his left leg and slammed it into the ground. Using the force, he charged forward and leaped into the distance. A figure appeared in a flash. Constantine had blocked his way. The clearly visible ruptured intestines in his abdomen wriggled and connected on their own, healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. The flesh and blood on the exaggerated wound were also growing and gathering crazily. It seemed that in a few seconds, everything would be restored to its original state, except for his clothes. "How dare you hurt the savior?" Constantine's sharp and angry voice reverberated in the surroundings. His swollen palm drilled into Satha's ears. In Satha's eyes, Constantine's entire body was emitting a milky white holy light. It was a stark contrast to his dark and sinister appearance. The natural pity in his eyes had already turned into mockery. "Damn it!" Satha cursed in his heart. He didn't dare hold back. All the pores on his right arm opened up and spurted out blazing white and blue flames. He used the flames to propel his fist forward with terrifying speed and strength towards his enemy. At the same time, the surrounding environment was affected and ignited, forming a net of fire. The net of fire rapidly shrunk, condensing into a violent ball of fire the size of a palm. It crashed towards Constantine from the side. Constantine didn't care about the ball of fire. He extended his hand and clenched his fist. Drops of blood seeped out from his pores as if they were alive. They turned into a sinister glove and blocked Satha's fist. Boom. The flames dimmed and scattered. Constantine was forced to take a few steps back. His shoulder was also hit by the violent ball of fire, turning it into a bloody mess. Satha stood firm. He wanted to seize the opportunity to strike again and complete his objective. However, he suddenly felt an invisible force pushing at him from the void. He couldn't help but take a few steps back. Around his shoulder, a strange airflow exploded, tearing apart his general's clothes and damaging his skin, muscles, and fascia. What's going on? This was the first time Satha had encountered such a strange thing. He was both shocked and frightened. There will be retribution for all who hurt. Constantine's sharp voice sounded again. He extended his body again and tangled with Satha. However, the milky white light around him had dimmed significantly. At this moment, Aman caught up. Satha had no choice but to give up on escaping. He struggled to hold on under the pincer attack of the two demigods. On the rooftop of the tall building, Renli's eyes lit up. Her right hand was already on the hilt of her sword. She looked eager to try. 3-on-3. She turned to Lu Cheng and suggested in a low voice. Lu Cheng thought for a moment, then shook his head solemnly. "Forget it, next time. That should be Dark Knight Bat. He's an American. If we can't finish him off here, I'm afraid he'll find trouble with Ku my girlfriend, when he returns to China. Besides, we don't have any grudges with him. I'm not against sparring with him. However, I don't think I can get past myself if I really want to kill him. Yeah, it's hard to tell who's good and who's bad in Niall's case. If a physical invulnerability expert were to form an irreconcilable grudge, it would be a huge headache. As long as a physical invulnerability expert was willing to go all out, it would be easy for them to kill a few people who didn't know any martial arts, even in China where there were strict regulations. The worst-case scenario was that they wouldn't be able to escape and would have to pay with their life. Lu Cheng stopped the mummy from killing Sirius. Since they were both doing business, the aftermath wouldn't implicate too many people. If there was a grudge that the mummy was willing to take a huge risk for revenge, he wouldn't just have to worry about Yenjika, who was in America. He would also have to worry about his parents, relatives, and friends. He couldn't possibly watch over them all the time or provide a head of state-level security. Of course, the opposite was also true. The mummy would also consider these issues before dealing with Lu Cheng. Renli was silent for a few seconds. Pursing her lips, she nodded. "All right." She looked at the battlefield longingly. "Then let's watch a little longer." "Sure." Lu Cheng agreed readily. At the climax of the battle, seeing that the mummy only had one opponent left, Satha, who was in a passive position, was furious. His eyebrows were raised. "Let's die together," he roared. It was as though something in his body had been ignited. Rumble. At the spot where the three of them were fighting, a huge fireball rose and expanded, turning into a mushroom-shaped cloud. The surrounding noise disappeared. It was both loud and silent. Sacrificing oneself, and perishing together. Rumble. The sound overlapped. The building shook. Some of the walls cracked. Some of the ceiling even fell. Did Satha use his killer move? Lu Cheng and Renli looked at each other. Two figures flew out from the edge of the fireball. One was Constantine and the other was Aman. Both of them were covered in dirt and were heavily injured. Scorch marks and potholes could be seen all over their bodies. Even their arms were dangling abnormally. Even Constantine's terrifying self-healing ability couldn't heal him in a short time. The milky white glow around him had dissipated. At this moment, another figure leaped out from the fireball and fled into the distance. It was General Satha. His body was charred black and stained with blood. He didn't look human anymore. He had controlled the power of his sacrifice and only used half of it. That way he would only be heavily injured but not killed. Seizing the opportunity when Constantine and Aman thought that he had completely self-destructed and when the other two were injured, he broke out of the encirclement and ran into the distance. He was a cunning old fox. Tap, tap, tap. He ran as fast as he could, paying no attention to his ridiculous injuries. Suddenly, a hand wrapped in a yellowish-white bandage reached out from the ground and grabbed his left ankle. Following that, a similar hand reached out and clamped down on Satha's right foot like a pincer. The mummy had killed the last opponent and caught up in time. Under normal circumstances, with his speed and the resistance of the ground, he wouldn't have been able to catch up to Satha. But now, his opponent was heavily injured and weakened in all aspects. He couldn't pull away. Satha tried to pull his feet, but his opponent didn't move at all, as though he was made of iron. Seeing Constantine closing in at high speed, his breath audible, he finally gave up. He closed his eyes, looked to the sky, and yelled the holy name. Then he burst into flames. Boom. The explosion was even more terrifying than the previous one. Satha's body was smashed into pieces on the spot. His fingers and flesh splattered and fell far away. The mummy right below him was almost buried with him. All the bandages were burnt to ashes, revealing the charred skin. 4 fingers were missing from his palm, and the bones in both arms were completely shattered. Constantine suffered another blow. His clothes were in tatters and only a third of his hair was left. He was in such a sorry state that he didn't look elegant at all. As expected of General Satha. Aman panted and observed his surroundings. The 3 demigods almost couldn't stop him. Aman, who was the least injured, still had troops to command. Thinking of Constantine's amazing recovery ability, he didn't mind bidding farewell and ran to the military base. The mummy dug into the ground and limped towards the nearest skyscraper. Constantine strolled beside him. Stretching his neck, he grumbled, "Estanek should have dealt with such a dangerous guy personally." "Don't worry. Estanek will deal with the last target," the mummy replied, panting. Lu Qing and Renli retracted their gazes and squatted down. With their backs against the rooftop, they relied on their enhanced senses and corresponding techniques to eavesdrop on the conversation between the mummy and Dark Knight Bat. This skyscraper only had 12 floors. "Very good." Constantine rubbed his temples. "I need to recuperate." As a dead, the mummy's injuries didn't affect his speech. He asked casually, "Didn't you want to deal with Lu and Peng and suck their blood?" Constantine's blood-sucking wasn't just a simple act of sucking. The feelings of the target before their death could help him obtain the corresponding abilities. Otherwise, with just the blood, the chances of him failing were very high. Even if he succeeded, he might not have gained much. As for the remnant blood in the Holy Grail, if it wasn't for the fact that the Savior had paved his own path and became a taboo figure in the early days without any prior explorations and accumulations, the mark he left behind would have been too strong. Even after 2,000 years, Constantine probably wouldn't have succeeded. Even so, his harvest was much worse than expected. Hearing the mummy's question, Constantine smiled. There are still many opportunities to deal with them, so there's no need to rush. For example, Lu's girlfriend is in Connecticut. He visits often, so I don't have to worry about missing out. His girlfriend is the granddaughter of 2 Terra grade experts. I can drink her blood while I'm at it. "Aren't you afraid of revenge?" asked the mummy, stunned. "It's better if my family and friends are dead," answered Constantine indifferently. On the rooftop, Renli suddenly sensed that Lu Cheng's aura had sharpened. Her eyes lit up. She clenched her fist and transmitted her voice. "Attack." "Yeah." Lu Cheng narrowed his eyes. He had made up his mind to kill Dark Knight Bat even if he had to chase him to the ends of the earth. "Are we going to deal with one each?" asked Renli through voice transmission. Lu Cheng thought for a moment, then shook his head. "The mummy is heavily injured. Let's take him by surprise and kill him together. That way the follow-up would be easy. P.S. Back to normal tomorrow. Make up for missed updates on Sunday." Chapter 607. After a brief discussion, Renli decided to remain on the rooftop while Lu Qing walked to the other side. With a push of his hand, he leaped out and landed accurately and lightly on the protrusion of the 10th floor. There was almost no sound, and the constant gunshots from the military base completely drowned out all movement. Just like that, he leaped down from the outer layer of the building like an agile monkey. After a few seconds, he landed firmly on the ground. Restraining his breath, sealing his body with ice and cutting off his scent, Lu Qing activated the cultivation method of concealment. He circled around the building and snuck to the front. Finally, with his back against the wall, he hid in a corner and waited for the mummy and Constantine to pass by. Throughout the entire process, the expression in his eyes was heavy, like a frozen lake, both calm and cold. 10 steps, 9 steps, 8 steps. While Lu Qing was silently counting down, Constantine suddenly paused. He cleared his throat and said in a slightly shrill voice, "Satha's suicide wouldn't have evaporated completely. There should be some blood and flesh left." "What are you trying to say?" asked the mummy in a deep voice as he slowly repaired his comminuted arm. "My reward was Satha's blood." Who knew he would choose the most extreme and violent method of resistance? Constantine shrugged. "I have to find the remaining parts of his body and suck out the remaining blood. It's better than nothing." The mummy thought for a few seconds and nodded reluctantly. "Then hurry up. I have to enter the sarcophagus to recover immediately." "No problem. I'm very sensitive to the smell of blood." Constantine chuckled and returned to the spot where Satha had sacrificed himself. As he walked, he narrowed his eyes and twitched his nose imperceptibly, trying to discern the faint smell of gunpowder. Lu Qing stopped his silent count. He arched his back slightly and bent his knees slightly, ready to strike. "Here," muttered Constantine in a low voice. He walked to the edge of the violent explosion and picked up half of a finger on the opposite side of the road. The severed part was charred black. This was one of the few traces of Satha left in this world. Constantine pinched his finger. The skin on the severed part of the body cracked open, and the little remaining blood flowed out. After smelling it with intoxication, Constantine stuffed the severed finger into his mouth like he was sucking on a popsicle. Even though the mummy often saw organs dug out, he couldn't help but feel nauseous. Now was the time. Lu Qing gathered his qi and blood and exploded it immediately. He straightened his legs and back and stamped his feet heavily. His whole body left behind afterimages as he dashed madly towards the mummy with the shrinking distance technique. Visualization appeared in his mind, but it didn't affect his speed. The mummy's heart clenched as he sensed something. However, before he could do anything else, the attacker had already rushed in front of him and occupied his entire field of vision. Lu Qing. The sense of danger turned into a cold current, bursting out from the mummy's spine. Both of his arms were fractured, and he could no longer exert any strength. He had no choice but to make a prompt decision and lift up his right calf, fiercely kicking on the spot. Pah! The air cracked open and the dim light turned into a blade. The blade kick fiercely chopped at Lu Qing, accompanied by a lot of black gas. In the face of such an attack, Lu Qing didn't care. He simply tilted his body to avoid being hit. Crack! The blade of the kick hit the ice armor on his ribs, shattering it and causing cold rain to fall. Lu Qing felt pain in his muscles and bones, and his killing intent intensified. He swung his right arm behind his back and threw a punch at the mummy's chest as the surrounding temperature dropped rapidly. A kick for a punch. His punch didn't seem to have hit flesh and blood. Instead, it sank into rotting wood. However, the power that froze his thoughts and froze his organs spread. Severe warning. The mummy's chest split open and his heart turned black. His eyes lost focus for a moment, as though he had returned to his usual slumber. However, as a dead, he had a strong resistance against freezing, petrification, and hibernation powers. He didn't lose his instincts and didn't need to think. He followed Lu Qing's punch and swung backwards to create a distance. He didn't give Lu Qing a chance to follow up with a combo attack. Constantine also reacted. Holding Satha's finger in his mouth, he turned around and pounced. His cape fluttered like a huge bat's wings. At this moment, a bright light appeared, dispelling the surrounding darkness. On the rooftop of the skyscraper, a clear ray of sword radiance descended. The green sword radiance spun at high speed, forming a violent tornado. From top to bottom, it enveloped the sluggish mummy. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The skyscraper became even more mottled. The sword radiance and tornado arrived in a flash. As long as the enemy was enveloped, they would be sliced into countless small pieces. The 12th style of the Wind Sect, Heaven's Burial. The sword intent pierced through the mummy's brain, waking him up abruptly. Seeing that he couldn't dodge, he could only endure the piercing pain in his brain. He jerked his shoulder and lifted his shattered arm. The surrounding ground was eroded, creating a lot of gravel. The gravel surged upwards rapidly, enveloping the mummy. A dry and harsh wind blew in all directions, sweeping up many pieces of gravel and sand and propelling them upwards. The sound of a blunt knife cutting flesh rang out. Strong winds blew in all directions, blowing out fine sand and flesh, which fell to the ground like rain. Bam! After an explosion, the misty sword radiance and strong wind dissipated. Ren Li, sword in hand, did a somersault in midair and descended gracefully. Not only was the mummy's yellowish-white bandages gone, even his charred skin was almost completely shaved off. There were several hideous and eye-catching wounds on his body and head. One could almost see his dull organs and grayish-white brain. His left arm was severed at the shoulder, and his right hand had lost its palm and wrist. He looked extremely miserable. But strangely, he didn't shed a single drop of blood. Instead, he used the momentum to leap up and towards the rapidly approaching Constantine. To him, at this moment, the vampire bat was unprecedentedly adorable and handsome. Constantine's figure appeared clearly in Lu Cheng's eyes. His speed was truly terrifying. Suddenly, Ren Li, who had yet to land, swayed in midair, as though she had transformed into an unrestrained gale. She changed directions and used the momentum of her fall to release a green glow. Her sword sliced through the air, heading straight for the Dark Night Bat. The 126th style of the Wind Sect, unfettered wandering. Lu Cheng completely ignored Constantine, who was about to attack. He arched his body until it was almost parallel to the ground and retracted his chi and blood. Following which, he straightened his back abruptly and raised his hands high into the air. All of a sudden, extreme darkness appeared around him, and the darkness was dotted with bright and scorching stars, as if the universe had shrunk down. With a whoosh, the starry sky shot upwards as Lu Cheng raised his hands. In an instant, it spread and enveloped the mummy. Frost immediately formed on the surface of the mummy's body. As though his body was sealed, he lost all ability to change directions in midair. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. The stars enlarged and transformed into Emperor Yen. They bombarded the mummy's body in a frenzy, producing intense explosions and igniting flames that could bury everything. No! The mummy's screams came to an abrupt end. His body was torn apart by the terrifying chain of explosions and turned to ashes in the blazing white flames. This was the secret art that combined cultivation and martial arts, the foundation that allowed Lu Cheng to make the great leap, Cosmic Phantom. At this moment, the mummy's severed left arm and right palm fell to the ground, stirring up dust. It was a lonely story of the glory days of a physical invulnerability mighty one. Bam! Of course, Constantine wouldn't let Ren Li cut him in half. He dodged to the side, and as the afterimage slowly faded away, he clenched his fist and hit the side of his opponent's sword. His opponent was sent flying, but Ren Li still landed steadily on the ground. Before he could turn around and attack Lu Cheng, Constantine heard the mummy's screams, saw fire rain falling, and saw ashes and dust drifting in the air. His scalp went numb. Pushing off the ground, Constantine sprinted into the distance, leaving behind afterimages as though he had spread his wings. He was so decisive that he wanted to shake off the two ambushers with his speed. At this moment, a strong gust of wind blew and green flashed. In a few leaps, Ren Li had caught up to Constantine's back. She was also good at speed and footwork. Originally, she would have been slower than Constantine since she had just broken through. However, her opponent was seriously injured. Seeing that Ren Li was entangled with the Dark Night Bat, Lu Cheng imitated Satha with his own realm. The pores under his feet and on his back opened up at the same time. Emperor Yen force exploded slightly, spewing out bluish-white flames. Using the recoil, Lu Cheng seemed to have transformed into a rocket launching a satellite. Clenching his fist, he leaped over 100 meters with a bang and punched the side of Constantine's face. Chapter 608. The sudden burst of light illuminated Constantine's pale face. The shadow created by a fist grew larger and larger, and soon covered the side of his face. Before the fist made contact, the terrifying force and the exaggerated sense of impact could be felt, as if it could easily shatter a thick steel plate. At the same time, Ren Li swung her sword 3 times. Thin and sharp green wind blades slashed out horizontally as though she was going to cut her opponent into 4 pieces. Faced with such a situation, Constantine didn't dare hesitate. He immediately made up his mind. Dark light rose around him, rolling and viscous. Black gas filled the air and enveloped his body. Bam! Lu Cheng's jet impact hit the dark light on Constantine's side. Black spots splattered everywhere and the fog dispersed. The rapid sound of collision lasted for a long time like drilling. Buff, buff, buff. 3 streaks of misty sword light landed on Constantine's body. The dark light fluttered like black butterflies, but its sharpness and strength were taken away. In the blink of an eye, the dark light and black gas around Constantine dissipated, revealing his tattered tuxedo and dust-stained white shirt. His illusory body was revealed. His face was so pale that it was almost transparent. The finger in his mouth fell limply. He seemed to have lost all weight and traces of his existence. Following the momentum of the impact, he drifted swiftly into the distance. Lu Cheng and Renli were about to give chase when the scattered dark light and black spots suddenly circled around like countless bats that had suddenly risen from an underground cave. They glowed with a dark red light and carried a sense of danger. They seemed to have bared their fangs, forcing the two of them to give chase. One of them launched a heavy scorching punch and chased after the flames, while the other turned into a surging tornado with sword light. Both were blocked. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. The numerous small dark night bats quickly gathered and drilled into Constantine's body. He regained his sense of substance and was no longer illusory. His complexion also returned to normal. Dark Night Reunion. This not only defused Lu Cheng and Renli's attacks but also helped Constantine put a safe distance between them. Seeing Renli charging at him with her sword and a fireball circling around Lu Cheng's body, a dark light flashed in Constantine's dark red eyes. He snapped his right hand. All of a sudden Lu Cheng felt his surroundings turn dark. He lost the burning light from the previous explosion, the sound of guns and cannons from the nearby military base, the bright moon and sparse stars in the sky, and the enemy's figure. It was as if his senses had been deprived. Whether it was his eyes, ears, nose, or body, there was nothing to be gained. Even the reflection of the ice mirror in his heart lake had been reduced to a radius of 1 meter around him. With a quick thought, Lu Cheng circulated his chi and blood and brought out his starry sky. He pushed his ability to foresee danger to the maximum and took the initiative to examine the situation. At the edge of absolute darkness, Constantine heaved a sigh of relief. He couldn't be bothered to gracefully bow and bid farewell. He immediately turned around and was about to flee. This move of his was known as the Moonless Black Curtain in China, which belonged to the Dark Sect. In the Samano royal family, it was known as the Blood Clan's domain. It could absorb all light and sound waves within a small area, affecting the senses of the opponent and creating hallucinations. No matter how hard the opponent tried, they would not be able to escape and would only be able to walk in circles. At this moment, a green light flashed in front of Constantine's eyes. He saw Renli holding a long sword, rushing out of the darkness toward him without looking back. Her eyes were blank at first, but then they were filled with surprise and confidence. Her intuition is terrifying. As Constantine's thoughts raced, Lu Cheng strode out from behind Renli. The blazing blue fireball around him was about to shoot out. Narrowing his eyes, Constantine ignited his blood, crouched down and punched the ground. Bam! Right in front of him, the ground seemed to have been split open by an invisible sword. A crack more than 10 centimeters wide appeared, extending for almost 100 meters. It grew narrower and narrower. At the corresponding position in the airflow was completely separated. The balcony above was also split into two. There were at least a few floors. Lu Cheng and Renli immediately pulled their muscles and dodged to the side in time, narrowly avoiding the attack. However, the strong wind that Renli stirred up had already been split into two and dissipated silently. The fireball around Lu Cheng remained in its original position and cracked in the middle. It was as though a dud had been set off. In the end, it collapsed into specks of brilliance. Constantine's punch bounced back. He crossed his arms and grabbed his ribs. Then he tore off 2 pieces of flesh and threw them to his opponents on his left and right sides. The 2 bloody lumps of flesh seemed to still be alive. They wriggled in the air and grew on their own. In an instant, they turned into 2 streaks of blood that resembled human skin. They covered Lu Cheng and Renli like gangrene attached to bones. Every detail was distinct, evil, and dangerous. After this attack, Constantine immediately turned around. Without looking back, he dashed into the distance in the form of a floating light in the night and turned into a nearby street. Facing the monster transformed from flesh and blood, Lu Cheng threw a punch without mercy. The blazing blue flame condensed on the surface of his 5 fingers. It kept shrinking until it finally reached its limit. Boom. White light burst out, illuminating the surroundings. The thrown flames and the shockwave swallowed the human skin like blood in an instant. They sizzled and burned to ashes. On the other side, Renli spun her sword, creating a green hurricane that rose from the bottom to the sky. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The bloody human skin, fell into the hurricane as if it was in a cutting machine. In a few moments, it was cut into countless crimson water droplets that scattered over a dozen meters around them. Lu Qing and Renly didn't waste any time. One of them secretly activated the attainment formula, while the other used the wind steps. They swept across the road at high speed and entered the street where Constantine's aura remained. After chasing for a few hundred meters, they came to a crossroad. They stopped at the same time and looked at each other. They saw the doubt in each other's eyes. Here, Constantine seemed to have split into two, one to the right and the other to the front. Their auras were very real and there were traces to prove it. Lu Qing and Renly used their own tracking techniques and came to the conclusion that both directions were possible. Their danger premonition didn't work because they lacked a direct stimulus. We'll each chase one side. Once we confirm it's fake, we'll go back the way we came. Lu Qing believed that he and Renly could hold off Constantine's crazy attacks for a while and wait for reinforcements from their companions. The only question was whether or not Renly would leave and never come back. But thinking of Constantine's aura along the way, she would have a way to go back and not be afraid of getting lost. Let's hope so. Any more delays and the enemy would be far away, giving them the time to hide their aura and traces. Lu Qing didn't dare to waste time discussing the problem. He could only trust Renly fully. With a tap of his foot, he turned and dashed into the street on the right with a bang. Renly's eyes were bright. She ran forward excitedly, stirring up a gust of green wind that blocked their vision. Lu Qing chased for nearly a kilometer before a crossroad appeared in front of him. Constantine's aura and traces split into two again, going in opposite directions. Which direction should I go? He was a little lost. This Dark Night Bat was really tricky to deal with. No physical invulnerability expert is easy to kill. I can only rely on my luck and pick a side. Lu Qing muttered to himself. He habitually chose the left side. At times like this, the wrong choice was better than stopping in his tracks. The wrong choice could at least prove which side was real and which would only delay time. If he stopped, not only would he be wasting time, he wouldn't be able to come to a conclusion. Just as Lu Qing was about to take a step, the sound of the wind came from afar. Renly had finished her test and caught up with him. He used his own blood and flesh to fake his aura and traces, said Renly slowly. Lu Qing came to a realization and made a prompt decision. He used it again here. Let's split up again. I have a way to track him now. Renly didn't take a step but emphasized proudly. What is it? Asked Lu Qing, surprised and delighted. Renly opened her left hand, revealing Constantine's wriggling flesh. She smiled and said, the plague sex method. It's hard to curse him with just flesh. But within 10 kilometers, it's not a problem to track him down. Impressive. Lu Qing gave her a thumbs up and didn't say anything else. Renly smiled proudly. She clenched her left hand and visualized in her mind. Her eyes glowed like a venomous insect. After a few seconds, the flesh in her fist combusted into dark red ashes and scattered on the ground. As if alive, the ashes formed a line and turned into a bloody arrow pointing to the right. Lu Qing and Renly immediately took a step forward. Using their own methods, they gave chase like a high-speed train. At the next few intersections, they used the remaining ashes as a guide to break through Constantine's maze formation. After 3 minutes of chasing, they finally saw their opponent, who had slowed down and was trying to heal himself. Constantine's eyes narrowed. He said hatefully, "All of you will die." As he said this, his body lit up with a milky white glow. It was as if a god was walking on earth. All his wounds, fatigue and exhaustion disappeared quickly. In a short moment he was back to his peak condition. This severely depleted the savior's blood he had absorbed. All his abilities would be permanently weakened in the future. Chapter 609. The milky white light shone down, illuminating a 50-meter radius around Constantine. It was like a projection of heaven on earth. Constantine, who was wearing a tattered tuxedo and a dirty white shirt, suddenly disappeared from the Holy Light Kingdom. An instant later, he mysteriously reappeared beside Lu Qing. Clenching his fist, he charged straight at Lu Qing's face. It was the Savior's supernatural ability, Flash. In the words of the Church, to walk on earth is to walk in his kingdom. Following the change in Constantine's position, the area enveloped by the holy light also shifted. Lu Qing's ice mirror clearly illuminated the surroundings. The moment Constantine appeared, Lu Qing sensed it. With a twist of his waist, he turned his body from the side to the front, avoiding the enemy's attack. His left fist shot out from his waist, aiming for the opponent's lower abdomen at lightning speed. Not far away, Renly took a step to the side, shifting her position horizontally. She didn't turn around in a hurry. Instead, she swung her forearm, holding her sword, and swung it back. A thin but sharp green blade slashed towards Constantine's neck. Facing a pincer attack, Constantine didn't put up any defense. His joints cracked, his arm bent like a snake, and his dodged fist swung diagonally towards his opponent's head. Seeing this, the previous scene flashed across Lu Cheng's mind. When Constantine was shrouded in the milky white light, Satha smashed a fireball at him. At the same time, he suffered a strange explosion at the same part of his body. Without any analysis or consideration of the cause and effect, Lu Cheng instantly made a decision based on his battle instincts. He detonated the Emperor Yen force in his wrist, causing his fist to shoot upwards and hit Constantine's right forearm from the bottom up. The impact caused the milky white glow to flicker, scattering starlight, and caused his opponent's punch to deviate from its original position. At the same time, a strange airflow exploded. His right forearm hurt and he almost lost his defensive stance. As expected, Lu Cheng's heart skipped a beat as he understood. At this moment, Renly's green wind blade slashed at Constantine's neck, splitting the milky white light and forcing him to tilt his head subconsciously. Swoosh! The airflow stirred and a thin blade appeared out of thin air, cutting through Renly's defensive squall and leaving a deep wound on her fair neck. Just as blood was about to gush out, her muscles wriggled and sealed the wound, leaving only a hideous scar. Failing to land a hit, Constantine disappeared and reappeared behind Renly. He threw a straight punch at his opponent's spine. The surface glowed with blood red as if it was poisonous. Renly's eyes didn't change. She slightly leaned to the side and pulled back her arm. The hilt of her sword was like an iron hammer, ruthlessly colliding with the enemy's fist. Constantine paused and disappeared, leaving only afterimages. And Renly almost lost control of her long sword. Bam bam bam. Constantine kept flashing as if he had become two people. He fought separately with Lu Cheng and Renly, not giving them a chance to launch a pincer attack. Every punch and claw of his was infused with the power of darkness and blood poison, which could invade the enemy and bring about continuous negative effects. If it weren't for Lu Cheng's Emperor Yen and Renly's plague sect, and the fact that force concentration could effectively neutralize the negative effects, they would have been suppressed by Constantine alone. Even so, considering the terrifying and strange rebound, both of them were a little restrained. Bzzzt bzzzt bzzzt. Around Renly, the milky white light was like the noon sun. It quickly melted the snow and neutralized the hidden fragrance that she had secretly cast. Bam bam bam. Lu Cheng punched and kicked, mainly defending against the enemy's frenzied attacks. He had planned to scatter the flames and trigger the rain of fire to hasten the disappearance of the kingdom of holy light. It was obvious from the battle between Constantine and Satha that such a domain would be weakened by external factors and wouldn't last long. However, after a few rounds he keenly sensed that Dark Knight Bat's combat skills were not very outstanding. He seemed to rely more on different supernatural abilities. In less than 30 seconds of battle he had used more than 6 types. His combat skills were only at the level of a beginner in the dance stage. He could be considered proficient but not strong. He might have studied and practiced, but he definitely hadn't put in the most effort. With a thought, Lu Cheng swung his forearm to block when Constantine's palm, which was shrouded in black gas, came at him. Seeing that the two of them were about to collide, he suddenly unleashed the hidden Emperor Yen force, pushing his forearm up and making a sudden change in direction. Then his joints popped and his 5 fingers stretched out rapidly, grabbing the enemy's wrist. Passing through the thin milky white brilliance, he completed the capture. Lu Cheng's other hand seemed to be shackled by the void. But that didn't stop him from loosening his grip. He twisted his arm like a snake and held it against his joints, temporarily restricting Constantine's flash. Constantine's weakness wasn't obvious when they were fighting openly. But when it came to close-quarters combat and agility, his weaknesses were exposed. At that moment, Renly stepped on the ground and changed direction. She stabbed her sword at Constantine's side and visualized it in her mind. Just as she was about to hit the milky white light, she suddenly turned the tip of her sword into a tip. Using the blade as a lever, she lifted it up. Whoosh! Wind howled. A cyan light erupted under Constantine's feet and turned into a tornado. It wrapped around him and sent him up into the air. Lu Cheng pulled back in time and wasn't affected. Wind Sect's 10th move, Breath of the Nine Heavens. While Renly was also affected by the tornado and was floating uncontrollably, Lu Qing suddenly bent down and was parallel to the ground. The power of 9 heavens' breath surged into Constantine's body, restricting his freedom of movement within the kingdom of holy light. He could only watch as his body rose. But he wasn't worried at all about Lu Qing's accumulated power, for he was still wrapped in the milky white brilliance. Thanks to his super strong self-healing ability, all harm must be repaid. 1 for 1, no problem. Constantine's dark red eyes flashed. Lu Qing's eyes were wide open. He straightened his back and raised his hands as though he was questioning the heavens. Around him was the reflection of the universe. Darkness and coldness were the main elements, embellished by heaviness and scorching heat. Following the direction of his arm, the scene shot out into the holy light country and enveloped Constantine. The fusion of cultivation and martial arts, cosmic phantom. In an instant, the milky white light around him froze as though it had turned into an ice coffin, turning Constantine into a bug trapped in amber. How dare he? Hardly had Constantine's shock occurred to him when the stars collapsed one after another and crashed into the ice coffin. There was no end to it. Boom, boom, boom. Flames exploded in midair. Blazing white and blue fireworks bloomed, swallowing the holy light country completely. Boom, boom, boom. Lu Qing seemed to be frozen in place and couldn't move. The air around him burned spontaneously, firing cannons in the air. Fireballs swarmed and exploded one after another. Boom, boom, boom. The shockwaves crashed and the fierce flames burned. Lu Qing covered his entire body in the ice armor. He didn't hold back at all as he surged with force, shattering layer after layer of crystals. Renly landed on the ground. She twisted and turned her long sword, stirring up a strong wind that blew away many of the fireballs and scattered them around. Seeing that the ice spirit force was almost exhausted, the explosions finally stopped. Lu Qing stamped his feet and charged out of the smoke. His body was mostly charred and injured. In midair, Constantine's milky white brilliance had completely disappeared. He no longer had the sense of holiness and holiness. His tuxedo and dark red cape had completely shattered into pieces, turning into butterflies fluttering in all directions. A few strands of his hair were still burning silently. His feet stepped through the special leather shoes with cracked bottoms and landed on the ground. He wasn't injured and his aura didn't drop significantly. However, at this moment he was no longer the savior. Narrowing his eyes dangerously, Constantine leaped, dodging Renly and pouncing on the exhausted and injured Lu Qing. He wanted to finish off or severely injure one of them first. When it came to one-on-one, it was much easier to decide whether to fight or run. At this moment, Lu Qing raised his hands and pointed to himself. He said in a deep voice, "Jia." In just a short moment he was rejuvenated, full of energy and replenished with ice force. Other than some residual injuries, he didn't look like he had been through a fierce battle. Seeing Constantine close in, he gathered his chi and blood, gathered the universe in his lower abdomen, and shifted the stars to form the fighting formula. Suddenly, Lu Qing's muscles expanded dramatically. Tendons popped out and moved like dragons. Bam! He threw a punch at Constantine, and the strong wind that he stirred up extinguished the flames around him. Constantine knew that Lu Qing knew the 9 words formula, but he didn't expect him to use it like this. The shadow of the fist in his eyes grew bigger and bigger, as if he was looking at a legendary giant. Chapter 610. At this critical juncture, Constantine, who couldn't retract his momentum, could only stomp his right foot and push out his fists to block Lu Qing's iron hammer. The ferocious force made all his muscles and fascia vibrate like a spring, producing a buzzing sound. Boom! At the point of contact between the two of them, the airflow exploded and white waves rippled outwards. Constantine felt as if he had turned into a pyramid with his fist as the tip. Under Lu Qing's terrifying strength, one point led to the rest of the structure, which spread rapidly and was about to cause the collapse of the entire pyramid. Constantine didn't dare to take it head-on. His arms sank and his body floated backwards as though he was sent flying. However, the air currents in the air buffeted his body, allowing him to retreat even faster than Lu Qing's stride. If it had been a one-on-one fight, he could have gotten rid of Lu Qing's follow-up combo and turned the tables around with this supernatural ability. However, his opponent was not alone. He suddenly felt a sharp pain in his back. His spine felt like it was about to explode and all his hair stood on end. Renly's sword flashed like a shuttle. The green needle-like light pierced towards his tailbone. It was fast and urgent but silent. Constantine's eyes narrowed. Dark red blood light suddenly rose around him. His rapid retreat came to an abrupt halt. It was so strange that it seemed to violate the laws of physics. Bam! His accumulated strength exploded. He turned to the side and dodged Ren Li's fatal sword. However, this delay allowed Lu Qing to close the distance. He gathered his chi and blood again and used the stars to form the fighting formula. Bam! He was more than 2 meters tall, with bulging muscles and bulging veins. He looked like an ancient giant from the depths of the underworld. He shook his shoulders, tightened his arms, and swung out like a sledgehammer. The shadow in his eyes deepened. Constantine took a deep breath and inflated his body like a balloon. He was more than 2 meters tall, a few times thicker. His white shirt and casual pants weren't as loose as his martial arts suit. They immediately tore apart, revealing his pale green skin and exaggerated muscles. This was an ability he had absorbed from a victim. He named it Hulk. He swung his arm like he was swinging a baseball bat and hit Lu Qing with a bang. The muscles of the two giants bulged and their veins were bulging. Their thick arms collided with each other, raising a tornado and deafening explosions. Rumble. Lu Qing swung his arm back and took a step back, returning to his 1.8-meter-tall form. Constantine, on the other hand, stomped on the ground, leaving behind 2 distinct giant footprints. His body began to shrink. Right at this moment, Renly made her move again. Green light flashed and hacked down vertically, about to split the opponent in half. Having learned her lesson from the previous pincer attack, she didn't attack at the same time as Lu Qing. Instead, she attacked back and forth, one after another. This was to prevent Constantine from using his supernatural ability to block both of them at the same time and create an opportunity to escape. Her overall goal was to not give him a chance to catch his breath. While the Hulk's power was still intact, Constantine slapped the side of the green sword light. Ren Li's long sword was knocked askew and almost slipped out of her hand. However, Ren Li's vertical slash was just a pretense. Her killer move came from her feet. She kicked out with both feet and exerted force in a small area, creating 2 thin but sharp wind blades that slashed at the enemy's chest. With 2 puffs, Constantine's abdomen split open, revealing hideous flesh and blood. He shrunk back to his original size as though he had been deflated. Just as he was about to reach out and grab Ren Li, she had already retreated with the wind. Lu Qing took a step forward and used force concentration again, forming the fighting formula. Bam bam bam. His muscles swelled, exploding with gang chi sounds. His martial arts suit was stretched tight, perfectly outlining his masculine and muscular body. Seeing his opponent transform into a giant again and swing his fist at him, Constantine could only grit his teeth and summon a dark glow. Rolling black gas made everything around him sticky. Rumble. Lu Qing landed a punch on his opponent's forearm. The violent force disintegrated his dark glow, and the black gas turned into butterflies that fluttered in all directions. Dark Knight reassembly, neutralizing the force and taking away the impact. The dark glow and black gas dispersed. Constantine's face was so pale that it was almost transparent. His body seemed to have lost its sense of existence, drifting away with the wind like an illusion. At this moment, Renly used wind steps and caught up with him. She jumped up before the countless vampire bats could fly back to reassembly. She turned around in midair, head down and legs up. Whoosh! The wind howled and the sword flashed. The clear mist spun at high speed, bringing with it a tornado that enveloped Constantine. The Winsek's 12th move, Heaven's Burial. The tornado was getting stronger and stronger, and the sharpness was getting stronger and stronger. Constantine's head was being attacked by the sword will, and his head felt like it was splitting open. He roared forcefully and the bats flew back faster. When the wind stopped, Ren Li's figure reappeared. She flipped around with her sword 10 centimeters above Constantine's head and landed firmly behind her enemy. Constantine shielded his head with his arms. His eyes were blank and unfocused. Before Lu Qing could attack again, a series of smooth cuts suddenly appeared on the surface of his body. Following which, the wind exploded, tearing his body into pieces. Constantine's arms were broken into 5 pieces, and there were countless pieces of his torso. Only his legs were still intact. Along with his internal organs, they were scattered all over the place. Bam! Constantine's head finally hit the ground. Due to his protection, there weren't any wounds. However, the light in his eyes had dimmed, leaving behind only confusion and unwillingness. That was tough, Renly exclaimed in satisfaction as she sheathed her sword. Dark Knight Bat wasn't just strong, he had many tricks up his sleeves. Even with her and Lu Qing working together, They almost couldn't hold him back. "Let's leave this place first. I'm afraid that the general will notice us and come back," suggested Lu Qing as he looked around. "Okay." Renly was also exhausted. She didn't want to watch the commotion in the military base. Instead, she and Lu Qing left the place and came to the entrance of the highway in the north of the city. Renly looked at the sky and said, "I have to meet up with Priest Indeka. I won't stay there for long. I'll leave as well. I'll consider returning to the war-torn zones after I master the Wind Sect's physical invulnerability chapters. I might even participate in the title match. What about you?" "Yeah. We haven't mastered our respective physical invulnerability chapters. Compared to enemies of the same level, our weaknesses are more obvious." Lu Qing nodded in agreement. If it weren't for the fact that his cosmic phantom was equivalent to a physical invulnerability secret art, he might not have been able to take down Dark Knight Bat or the Mummy. After lamenting, Lu Qing continued, "I won't be going to Decca. I'll make a trip back to Farduat first. I'll get information on Lin Ke and see where he was last seen. Do we need to enter the war-torn zones?" If possible, Lu Qing planned to ask his master to bring him the Ice Sect's physical invulnerability chapters. He would enter the war-torn zones to look for Lin Ke after he mastered the basics. "Alright then. I'll be leaving first," Renly replied with a smile. She waved her hand casually and ran south without looking back. She was full of confidence as she ran back to Kukhang. The corner of Lu Cheng's mouth twitched. He hurriedly stopped her and pointed her in the right direction. After watching Renly leave, he thought for a moment and returned to Kukhang. He took a detour to the place where he fought with Constantine. After the death of the Dark Knight Bat, Lu Qing didn't feel relieved or relieved. Instead, he still felt tense, as though he still had a premonition of danger. That was why he planned to return to the battlefield and examine it carefully. He also planned to take a piece of Constantine's flesh with him and hand it over to the military for research. At the place where the physical invulnerability experts had last fought, smoke drifted in the air and body parts were scattered everywhere. A few flames burned weakly in the surroundings. Everything was as quiet as an oil painting. After a few minutes, Constantine's head suddenly moved. His dark red eyes rippled with vitality once again. He exhaled a thin red mist that shrouded the surroundings. The pieces of flesh wriggled strangely, slowly returned and reformed. After failing to severely injure the two enemies in the Kingdom of Holy Light, Constantine knew that he wouldn't be able to escape by normal means. Therefore, he didn't make any unnecessary attempts. Instead, he worked hard to create a situation. He used the final and most bizarre ability of the Savior to escape his predicament. Resurrection. As long as his head wasn't crushed and his flesh was still intact, he could be resurrected. For this reason, he appeared to be at a loss. He alternated between arrogance and shock. After a dozen minutes, the mangled Constantine finally stood up. Every wound on his body was still there, making him look like a terrifying stitched monster. He was at his weakest now. His self-healing ability wasn't enough to heal his wounds. "I will repay you properly." Constantine gritted his teeth as he struggled to move away. He was very weak now and didn't want to take any risks. He didn't want to be seen by Lieutenant General Amon, who might come to investigate after noticing the commotion. At this moment, his heart skipped a beat. He turned his head to the north and stared at Lu Qing, whose face was full of astonishment. They stared at each other. "No!" Constantine roared in grief and anger. He tried to stagger away. "Why is he back?" In his confusion and shock, Lu Qing instinctively activated the attainment formula. A strong wind blew as he rushed to his opponent. He shook his left arm and threw a punch at the strange enemy's face. Constantine raised his fists to block but was knocked away. Lu Qing's right fist, heavy and scorching white, followed up with a bang and landed on the enemy's nose. Crack. Constantine's nose collapsed. His face was deformed and cracked. His eyes were filled with fear and despair. Then the white light exploded. Boom. Countless fragments, stained with red and white colors, sprayed out, painting a beautiful abstract oil painting. P.S. Begging for monthly votes. Chapter 6:11. Bam. After smashing Constantine's head with one punch, Lu Qing lifted his left leg and lashed out again with a whip kick. With a layer of blazing blue flames, his kick landed on his opponent's body. Smoke and dust flew up, and the body that hadn't completely fused back together was torn apart again. His body was set ablaze and slowly burned, emitting specks of red light. Only then did Lu Qing heave a sigh of relief. He had never heard of a mighty one who could resurrect after being dismembered. Even the vampire emperor of the Samano royal family couldn't do it. Only the mission sect had always claimed that the savior from 2,000 years ago could do it. However, they had added too many religious elements and mysteries to this story, so it wasn't as believable. Who would have thought that Dark Knight Bat would be able to accomplish such an unbelievable feat? It was almost like a miracle. If it weren't for the fact that he had a premonition of danger and the alarm in his heart hadn't been lifted, he might have been able to escape. There would have been no end of trouble. Just as Lu Cheng was about to burn this strange enemy to ashes, he suddenly realized that the blood flowing out of his body had changed into different shades of red. There was dark red, rusty red, pale red, bright red, and so on. They intersected with each other, dotted with faint blue and milky white, and bubbled from time to time. This didn't look like blood at all. It looked more like a carelessly added chemical reagent. Constantine's muscles and tendons were also wriggling, each growing in a collapsing fashion. Some were paralyzed while others grew new fingers. It was a hair-raising sight. "Gene collapse," muttered Lu Cheng, frowning slightly. He had seen the tragic state of a gene collapse in the military's research materials. It was very similar, except that Dark Knight Bat's blood was even stranger. After a few seconds, all the changes disappeared. The flesh lost all signs of life. Some rotted rapidly while others were perfectly preserved. "This is so King weird." Lu Cheng couldn't help but curse. He found a piece of flesh the size of half a palm, sealed it in layers of ice and kept it in his pocket. As for the rest, he smashed down with his fist, causing blazing white flames to spread in all directions as they collided with the ground, burning them to ashes, leaving no medium for resurrection. After doing all that, he finally had the time to think about how Dark Knight Bat could come back to life. Could it be that his body structure has mutated to the point that it's similar to an earthworm? As long as it's not cut vertically, it doesn't matter if it's split in half? But just now, his heart was his heart, his lungs were his lungs, and his liver was his liver. There was nothing special about it. Perhaps his mutated root pulp is similar to a single-celled organism and can survive for a while. As long as it gathers again within a certain period of time, it won't completely lose its vitality. And this gathering is guided by the mind, so there shouldn't be any problems with the brain? Forget it, I won't think about it anymore. I'm not a researcher. I'll leave it to the military. But there's one thing I'm certain of. Dark Knight Bat's resurrection ability needs to be prepared. Otherwise, he could very well trade my life with injuries. Although Rin Li's Sky Burial is powerful, it doesn't threaten my life right from the start. It's more of a serial attack. At this point, Lu Cheng still didn't know the names of the two enemies just now, so he could only call them by their nicknames. After looking around, Lu Cheng didn't stay any longer. He left Kukhang at high speed and headed back to the port city of Fartuat. He only rested for a while when he found a secluded spot in the desert. He used the confrontation formula to clear his mind and body and accelerate the recovery of his injuries. After Lieutenant General Aman led the troops to occupy Satha's military base, he returned to the temporary base amidst the lingering gunfire. He waited for a long time but didn't see the mummy or Constantine return. He doesn't want his sarcophagus anymore? He's so badly injured. Aman was puzzled. He felt that something was amiss and immediately got up. Traversing through the urban jungle, he sprinted back to the battlefield where Satha had been forced to self-destruct. He looked around and quickly found the mummy's severed arm and palm. The yellowish-white bandages were all gone, and the charred skin had been sliced clean like a fruit, leaving only flesh and bones. He's dead. Aman narrowed his eyes, shocked and furious. There must have been a fierce battle here. Unfortunately, the gunfire in the military base was louder and the flames were brighter. Aman didn't notice anything amiss. Plus, no matter how badly injured the mummy was, he was still a demigod. He shouldn't have been killed so easily. Did Dark Knight Bat do it? Aman followed the trail, but it had been a long time. His aura had long since dissipated, so he could only give up halfway. But in the meantime, he found Constantine's attack that had split the ground open. He found the flesh and blood that had been deliberately set up. This made Aman overturn his previous guesses. His heart grew colder and colder. When he sent a regiment of soldiers to search the surroundings, he finally found another battlefield. He saw shattered bones covered in brain matter and ashes everywhere. Dark Knight Bat is dead too. Aman gasped, his heart skipping a beat. After working together, he had a better understanding of Constantine's strength and expertise. Judging from his mysterious behavior, he definitely had some hidden abilities. Even Aman wasn't confident in winning, let alone killing him. Killing 2 demigods in one go, even if one was heavily injured and the other a weakened demigod, wasn't an easy feat. It might even be extremely difficult. Just the thought of an enemy lurking in the dark sent chills down his spine. After a few seconds of silence, Lieutenant General Amon returned to the temporary encampment. He didn't search or pursue the matter, afraid that he would accidentally hit a steel plate and lose his life. In the heavily guarded headquarters, he reported to the Pharaoh. On the other end of the line there was silence at first. Then he asked, "Any clues?" "No. They destroyed the corpse and destroyed the traces. But from the remnants of Imposa's arm and palm, at least one of the enemies is skilled in cutting," Amon answered honestly. There was silence on the other end of the line again. After a while he finally spoke. "Put it aside for now. Maintain order in Kukhang. We'll investigate after this is over." "That's good too." Outside Fartuat port on a cruise ship, the sky was high and the sea was blue. The wind was clear and the scenery was vast. Lu Cheng stood on the deck, admiring the waves of the Sea of Death. He took out the satellite phone he had borrowed from the consulate and called his master. After recuperating, he had completely recovered. He had also changed out of his tattered martial arts suit and was now leaving with the last batch of evacuees from the port city. "Hello." Before long, Shi Jiangwo's aged voice sounded from the other end of the line. "Master, it's me. Cyrus and his family have evacuated from Nile." Lu Cheng explained the final details of the mission. "I knew about it last night." "Not bad. You did well," praised Geezer Shur with a forced smile. This was supposed to be a difficult mission filled with danger. He might even have to exchange blows with a physical invulnerability mighty one. With his disciple's supernatural ability awakened for the 3rd time and his body tempered by the Jin Dan, he wouldn't die so easily. But the stimulation would definitely help him build up his willpower and make the great leap. In the end, he advanced without external help. Not only did the mission become redundant, but its difficulty also plummeted. Lu Cheng briefly described the process and asked, "Master, is there any urgency with Lin Ke? Should I practice the physical invulnerability chapter or look for him first?" With brother-in-law's strength, it wouldn't be easy for him to get into trouble in the war-torn zones. It shouldn't be a problem to delay it for a while. Shi Jiangwo coughed and said, "There's no hurry. Old Man Ji has changed his mind. He got Shushan Studies men in the war-torn zones to watch over him and the military to help. He might also go for a stroll himself. You don't have to worry about that. Come back first. Practice the physical invulnerability chapter and stabilize your connection. Lin Ke is a prideful brat. Old Man Ji deliberately sent him to the war-torn zones to train. He asked you to look for him as an excuse to train you. But now what's the point of training?" "All right," sighed Lu Cheng. If brother-in-law hadn't awakened his supernatural ability in advance for the sake of becoming the national champion, he would have reached the peak of the inhuman stage by now. If he had trained for 2 years in the war-torn zones, he might have been able to reach the physical invulnerability stage. But he had just entered the inhuman stage and had just stabilized his foundation. As for the physical invulnerability stage, that was even further away. Lu Cheng closed his eyes and thought about Lin Ke's cold and reserved face. He suddenly felt that he wouldn't turn back until he reached the physical invulnerability stage. Hope for the best, Geezer Shur didn't dwell on this matter. After a moment of silence, he said, "Are you going to return to Longhu after mastering the basics of the physical invulnerability chapter?" "Yeah. I owe the Dragon King and the club too much," replied Lu Cheng with certainty. "That's good too. You haven't practiced the physical invulnerability chapter of the Fire Sect. If you complete a few more secret missions, you might be able to comprehend the divine kung fu of the Restriction Sect," said Geezer Shur happily. "Secret missions?" asked Lu Cheng thoughtfully. "They should have told you before. After joining Longhu, you will occasionally have to complete missions assigned by the military. For an inhuman it's very simple. All you have to do is be a security guard and cooperate with some experiments. When you reach the physical invulnerability stage, it will be relatively more difficult but not too dangerous." Cough, dangerous missions. You won't be the only one. Perhaps the Dragon King will participate as well. Anyway, after accumulating enough contributions, you will be able to comprehend the divine kung fu of the Restriction Sect of Taoism. Geezer Shur gave a rough explanation. Half sighing and half disdainful, he said, "Come back as soon as possible. Once the connection is stabilized and you have mastered the basics of the physical invulnerability chapters of the Ice and Fire Sect, you will be considered a true physical invulnerability expert. At that time, you will have plenty of opportunities to fight opponents of the same level. There will be plenty of life and death battles. Don't be like Peng and Ren, impatient to challenge physical invulnerability level enemies. Lu Qing suddenly felt guilty. Master, there's something I need to report to you. What is it? Geezer sure tensed up. His heart was in his mouth. This brat rarely speaks in such a tone. What did he do? Lu Qing cleared his throat and said, I met Renli last night. Together with her, we killed 2 physical invulnerability experts. What did you say? Geezer sure raised his voice. Chapter 6:12. Shocked by his master's reaction, Lu Qing started from the beginning. In order to buy time for Cirrus and his family, I chased after the mummy for a long time. Then I moved to the east of Kukang City, planning to harass any pursuers along the way and not give them a chance. Who knew I'd run into Renli, who was lost? At this time, an intense battle broke out at the military base. We were curious and went to watch. On the way, we met the mummy, Dark Knight Bat, and a physical invulnerability mighty one dressed like a general. They were ganging up on Satha. That should have been Satha. He rambled on, not to explain but to give his master time to think. We didn't plan to attack at first. But when Satha self-destructed, the mummy was heavily injured, and the physical invulnerability mighty one dressed like a general left. Dark Knight Bat suddenly mentioned Peng Liyun and my name. He seemed interested in our blood. He even planned to use coup in America to lure me in. Master, this is unacceptable. At the end of his speech, Lu Qing defended himself a little. Geezer Sher's tone returned to normal. So, you took action? You killed the mummy first? Tell me the details. He tried his best to act like a foolish disciple, but he couldn't help but curse in his heart. If physical invulnerability experts were easy to kill, they wouldn't be called physical invulnerability experts. I've roamed the war-torn zones for so many years, but I can count the number of people I've killed single-handedly, in groups. You've just broken through and you've already killed 2 of them. Is there any justice in this? Even with the help of demonic matriarch Qi's disciple, Renli, and the fact that the mummy was heavily injured after a fierce battle, it was still shocking news. Lu Qing immediately described the battle from beginning to end, including his self-created cosmic phantom, and how Dark Knight Bat was sewn back together after being dismembered, and how he came back to life. Geezer Sher's attention was diverted. He said, half shocked and half in awe, Dark Knight Bat suddenly appeared. This black bat appeared out of nowhere. Even the Americans are confused. They don't even know who he is. Only their popular superhero culture can create something like this. We sent agents to investigate the battlefield where a few physical invulnerability mighty ones died and found that the black bat is indeed powerful. He doesn't seem like someone who has just made a breakthrough. Tiske, the mission sect has always been praising the resurrection of the Savior. They claim that his blood contains the password to life. Who would have thought that the vampire-like black bat also has it? Brat, you didn't forget to bring back a piece of black bat's flesh, did you? This concerns whether or not your master's old injuries can be healed. Lu Qing was overjoyed. I definitely haven't forgotten. At least 3 tails. Are you trying to weigh pork? Geezer sure scolded jokingly. Master, can this really heal your old injuries after studying it? Lu Qing asked with concern. Geezer sure was silent for a moment. He sighed, which was a rare sight. Back then I was one of the best in the war-torn zones. I was practically invincible. At this point he paused again as though he was reminiscing about the glorious days of the past. There's something wrong with your use of idioms? Lu Qing criticized silently, not daring to interrupt. Sigh, it's a pity that I met a forbidden expert later on. This old man will never forget that battle. Although I managed to escape from danger, I was severely injured. His strange power invaded my body and fused into my root pulp like cancer cells. If Elder May hadn't restrained it in my lungs, I would have gone to meet my ancestors long ago. That external root pulp is inseparable from my own. They have almost become one. No matter how many methods are used to kill all the indiscriminate creatures in that area, it will reappear as new roots grow. If I were to change my lungs, my root pulp would have already mutated. The rejection reaction would kill all organs that aren't my own. Cough cough. My spirit fed back to my body and increased my tolerance, but I still couldn't completely digest it. If the military can find something from black bat's flesh, this problem might be completely solved. This was the first time Lu Qing heard his master talk about his injuries. He couldn't help but ask, Master, which forbidden expert was it? What's the matter? You still want to avenge your master? Geezer sure snorted, then softened his tone. We'll talk about it when you enter the forbidden territory. I'm telling you now, if you do anything stupid and impulsive, I won't be able to hold you back. You make it sound like I'm a dog that will break free from its leash and run away when you're not paying attention. Lu Qing complained inwardly. He didn't ask any more questions and set a return date with his master. After hanging up, he looked at the golden light shining in the waves and called Yan Zheka. Hello. The girl's soft and gentle voice sounded a little nervous. Lu Qing retracted his gaze, restrained his smile, and said hurriedly, I've completed my mission. Yan Zheka's tone lightened. Awesome. I knew missions would be easier after you reached physical invulnerability. She paused and said, Are you going to the war-torn areas to look for my brother next? No need. My master said that our grandpa has found someone else from Shushan study. He wants me to hurry back to the sect to practice the physical invulnerability chapters and consolidate my realm. Lu Qing replied with a smile, his expression gradually relaxing. That's for the best. With grandpa involved, he's worth two. Yan Zheka said in a good mood. Then she said with a hint of worry, but with my brother's stubborn temper, there's no way to bring him back unless he's knocked out. Lu Qing didn't hide his thoughts and said, I reckon he'll stay in the war-torn areas in the end, but he'll find a physical invulnerability expert from the military or Shushan study to look after him in secret. Brother-in-law is holding his breath and won't return until he reaches physical invulnerability. Sometimes my brother is really too tense. Yan Zheka sighed. After chatting for a while about Lin Ke, Lu Qing said with a sigh and a smile, our summer vacation trip was interrupted not long after it started. It's okay. This experience is better than 10 trips. Besides, we saw the aurora and the pyramids this year. It's enough, Yan Zheka comforted him. I'm going to train at Yambing Mountain. Why don't you come over? Just treat it as a vacation. I can't train the whole day. Physical invulnerability level secret arts are very taxing on the mind. Lu Qing suggested with a smile. Okay. Yan Zheka replied happily. After confirming the details, Lu Qing boasted, I met Renli who was lost last night. We worked together and killed 2 physical invulnerability experts. That can't be. Yan Zheka was stunned. She asked in confusion. That's a good reaction. Lu Qing was secretly pleased. He told her the whole story, especially emphasizing Dark Knight Bat's bad intentions. Yan Zheka was stunned. She felt touched and warm, but at the same time, felt that the supernatural ability of the enemy didn't seem to exist in reality. The wind on the deck was strong. With no one around, the call lasted for a long time. He even condensed frost to lower the temperature of the satellite phone. By the time he finished the call, the cruise was nearing the shore. Only then did he seriously consider whether the military would reimburse him for the phone bill. Tigny City. Lin Ke restrained the enemy and punched him in the chest, crushing his heart. Bam, bam, bam. His punches and kicks connected, leaving the enemy without a complete corpse. After doing all this, Lin Ke bent over, put his hands on his knees and panted heavily. His black hair, which he hadn't taken care of for some time, hung down, almost covering his dark and introverted eyes. Sweat soaked everything. There were obvious wounds on his body. There was even blood at the corner of his mouth. After a few seconds, he forced himself to stand up straight and took a deep look at the enemy. A mafia organization that abducts adults, traffics children, and breeds organs for the rich and powerful, waiting to be matched, could casually send out an expert with inhuman combat strength. Is this the war-torn zone? Retracting his gaze, Lin Ke turned into a rundown street. The people guarding the entrance were children in their teens carrying real guns. His footsteps were light. Lin Ke's back slowly disappeared at the end of the street. Wuxia Province, Shanggao Airport. Lu Qing got off the flight in a relaxed manner. He didn't have any luggage, only his phone, wallet, and the special gifts he bought in Acropolis. With so many people coming and going, he didn't have to worry about stray bullets or explosions. He was safe and smiling everywhere. He turned on his phone as he walked. While chatting with Yan Zheka, he sent a message to the driver who had contacted him before he got on the plane. I'm here. The driver replied quickly, saying that he was beside the pillar facing the arrival hall exit. He didn't describe what he was wearing because he believed he could recognize Lu Qing, the former heavenly son of the era. He's been out of the martial arts circle for almost a year due to injuries. He's about to make a comeback. I wonder how he's doing. The driver guessed curiously. After a few minutes he saw Lu Qing walk out. He was wearing a white t-shirt with exotic patterns, casual pants that reached his ankles and dark-colored running shoes. His posture was leisurely and his expression was peaceful. He didn't look like he had just gone through a bad time or suffered a heavy blow. "Hello, Marshal Uncle Lu," the driver approached him with a smile. He was half an Ice God sect disciple and had served in the sect for almost a decade. "Hello." Lu Qing nodded with a smile. He was approachable but clearly didn't want to chat. The driver understood and didn't nag. He led Lu Qing to the parking lot, pressed the key, opened the door and invited him in. Lu Qing sat in the back and leaned back comfortably. Sometimes he chatted with his wife, sometimes he closed his eyes to rest. The driver occasionally glanced at him through the rearview mirror. He felt that this martial uncle of his had an outstanding bearing. He was neither arrogant nor self-abased. He had the air of a grandmaster. "The injuries this year have really trained me," the driver thought to himself as he drove the car more steadily. After a while the car drove into Yambing Mountain. Looking at the surrounding scenery, Lu Qing sighed. The last time he was here he had just gotten rid of a hidden danger and was in the midst of recuperation. He was relaxed and had some baggage. But now he was at peace, at ease. A physical invulnerability expert was considered a top executive anywhere. Outside the sect, Lu Qing got out of the car. With a smile on his face, he walked through halls and rooms. Under the greetings of disciples and servants, he arrived at the Ice Queen Pavilion. In the pavilion, Geezer Shur was drinking a little wine and shaking his head. Yi, whose white hair was thinning, came to a spot near the door. He sized Lu Qing up and suddenly sighed. "The younger generation will surpass us in time." That you're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.